And welcome to tonight's Yountville Town Council meeting for Tuesday, January 7th, 2020. Welcome to the new year. Go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker?
Here.
Councilmember Mueller?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dorman?
Here.
Mayor Dunbar?
Here.
Let the record reflect that Councilmember Durham is excused.
Thank you. And if I could ask one of our guests from the north, the Honorable Mayor of St. Helena, Jeff Ellsworth, to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Please rise and face the flag. Place your hand on your heart and follow with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up is the adoption of tonight's agenda. Are there any questions, proposed changes, or is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
Michelle, are we trying to do this electronically?
Let's not now.
Okay. There is a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Next up, public comment on items not on tonight's agenda. Hold on just a second. I have a spiel and then I invite people up.
I'm trying to get rid
For anyone new that doesn't know, this is, we still have public comment on items that are on the agenda here, but if it's something that's not agendized, you have up to 3 minutes to present to the council. So with that, I see we have one person ready to go. Please, if you would please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Bonzi. I'm a sole owner and employee of my landscape maintenance business for the past 12 years. The area I provide service to is all within the Napa Valley, and I have 6 clients within the town of Yountville. I understand the direction this council is moving in. However, I believe the council has given enough consideration to the initial economic impact, performed the research before the law goes into effect, or on the ongoing maintenance cost of purchasing new electric batteries, which may last a maximum of 18 months, was an unanticipated cost, and its impact on the landscape professionals, which will be expected to retool their equipment within 12-month period, while providing the same level of service to our customers within the town of Yountville, taken under consideration. For example, actually I have a question. In the ordinance, page 2, section S, I was wondering if you can get that clarified. It talks about electric powered blowers.
We're actually not able to have a dialogue about items not on the agenda. So if you go ahead and finish your comments and your question, tell us what your question is. If staff can answer it, they will here. If we can't do it here because it's not agendized, we'll make sure that we get an answer to you.
Oh, so I can't answer? I can't?
No, we can't have a dialogue on an item that's not on the agenda, but you can present your questions if you'd like.
Okay, this is just, it was based, this comment, let's see, for example, I recently purchased a Greenworks Pro battery leaf blower for $350, an additional battery at a cost of $225, and a charger that was close to $60. I paid $579.12. Each battery takes an average of 45 minutes to fully charge, and lasts an average of 15 to 20 minutes per yard. I have 6 accounts in Yountville, and 2 of my clients have very large areas requiring an average of 15, 20, 45 minutes, depending on the season. And this right here is based on if the electric powered is gonna be banned or not. Further, I will be required to use a battery powered equipment, because it may or may not have access exterior electrical outlets at the properties I serve, and the larger properties I provide to would require over 75 feet of electric cord, which is an additional cost. Moreover, the longer the electrical cord necessary to meet the distance required to clean these properties may create a voltage problem for the blower and reduces the efficiency of the leaf blower and may be a liability for my customers by tripping electrical circuit breakers. The equipment the landscape business needs cannot be the same as the average homeowner would purchase at the local hardware store. It must
And
be
you,
heavy.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you do need to wrap up because you've passed your 3 minutes. If you-
Actually, this is affecting my livelihood, and I'm serious. I'm invoking my First Amendment rights, and I respectfully ask the council if I can speak my mind, because I didn't sleep last night. I'm hardly eating. I'm going to be in poverty if all the equipment is going to be banned. I
So-
will be in absolute poverty.
Mr. Bonzi, you've been given your First Amendment rights to speak for 3
No,
minutes.
my First Amendment rights, I need to speak, because it's
You-
like you.
So please understand that during public comment, everyone is given 3 minutes.
No, I'm going to speak.
Sir, that is the law, and
No, the
You've
law
been
is
given-
I get my First Amendment rights to speak my mind.
Mr.
I'm going to
Bonzi-
be out in the streets. If my mom passes on, I have to do
Please
additional
understand
$800 to $1,000
I understand.
on top of that.
I understand
I-
this.
For a top notch.
Excuse me,
for,
sir.
For a top notch steel blower, it's $1,750.
Please respect where you are right now. You
No
are
one's
in.
respecting me.
Yes, we are. We've heard your 3
Oh,
minutes.
you're not respecting me. I'm going to be on the streets.
Sir.
I'm going to be on the streets in about 5 years if they ban gas power blowers and the lawnmowers and all that. What's next? Mowers?
I invite you to come back.
No. If someone touches me, I'm suing. I'm suing the city of Young. No one's going to touch me.
John, it's me.
I'm serious.
I understand.
John.
No consideration.
So this is a
I
friend,
didn't know. I just want to say
is
something.
this a friend of yours?
Yountville ought to be ashamed of themselves. It's an oppression of the laborer.
Okay.
The 7 sins, one of the 7 sins to cry out to heaven, oppression of the poor. God hears my cry, and I'm sick of it.
John,
Our rights are being stepped on,
they got it, John.
Okay.
and I have no support.
You
And
good?
I want to say I'm invoking the freedom of the press, and I'm invoking, I'm invoking the right to peaceful assembly. I have that right. It's we the people, not we the government.
Understood. And you've had your time.
I
here at
am
the
going to
council.
organize. I'm organizing a legal labor movement. If they support me, we are going to peacefully protest, and we have that unalienable right
Yes, you
to protest in the streets. And my goal is thousands upon thousands of people, because you're oppressing the laborer.
Okay.
My fellow
get it.
Mexican brothers and sisters, everyone, all of it.
I suggest you listen to your friend who's here that's trying to help you.
There's no shame. All
course
of you
not.
got to be ashamed of yourselves.
John, they get it.
I'm not rich.
John,
Sir, you've been given a chance to speak to us tonight, and I'd appreciate it if you'd respect our forum as a council.
You guys don't care. 5 years I'm going to be on the streets if they ban gas power blowers. It's a movement. I'm going all over. I
Okay.
heard about Novato
Thank you, sir.
is going to do it.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to speak up that it is very upsetting that this ban on
Could you please
blowers.
identify yourself for the record?
My name is Carol Duncan. I've lived here, actually I was born and raised 2 miles south of here.
Michelle, if you would start the timer, so we're just fair with everyone's time.
We've been on on Yount Street since 1976, and we have huge trees in our yard, and it's going to make it very difficult. I know for us to keep upkeep on it, and I know the minute it isn't kept up, that we'll get fined. And I don't know what you expect of us, especially the elderly people, where we've had to hire landscaping companies to come in and help us for this, to make the city of Yountville look beautiful. And then what do you expect of us? I mean, how do we keep our yards up? Rakes? We have a huge oak tree in our backyard. I would like to know what you expect of us.
As I mentioned with the previous speaker, we don't have a dialogue here.
Okay, all right, well.
When this
you've
item,
created a hardship for mainly the elderly people that have to have landscapers come in, and we'll be out there with our rakes.
so when this item comes back to the council, you're invited to continue
When
to
will
have
it
this
come back?
dialogue. It's not agendized yet. Steve, you're,
The item that you're referring to is not proposed for action today. It has been discussed at the request of a citizens group, and it's being under consideration, but it is not scheduled tonight for agenda. The council asked for more information and review. What I will say, the proposal was not to ban all leaf blowers. The proposal was to allow electric and battery, but ban gas.
But
So the
We
appro-
tested that last week, and
so
it takes
we're not
about
going to get into a dialogue,
2 or 3
ma'am?
hours longer.
What I would encourage you, the appropriate time to share your comments is to write, and when this item comes back on, it will be a discussion
Do
item.
we have a date for that?
Not yet. It will be, if you want to leave your name and an email with me or a phone number, I will make sure that
I
you.
would like to.
But, and I'd encourage everybody that wants to sign up for e-notifier so you can get all of the agenda items. But that would be the appropriate time, and then there will be agendized comments for all the people who may be in support, concern, or opposed to the item. But the item is not being scheduled for action at this point in
All
time.
right. Well, the paper made it sound like it was already passed.
No. It hasn't
I
even been
can't- I
discussed
can't-
as an
yeah,
item
there's been
for
no-
council consideration yet.
There's been no ordinance adoption. There has been a request by a citizens group for the ordinance to be considered, and the council is having that conversation. So everybody
Well-
needs to recognize that there is a conversation about the potential.
All right, well, we'll be back.
Anyone else like to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda? And I would just like, the gentleman that was just up, sir, would you like,
That's Carol's husband.
okay, but I don't know your name, sorry. Did you want to speak to this item while you were up before we had any other subject?
Not really, I think.
Okay.
They pretty much covered everything.
That's fine, I just wanted,
Take your time.
that's fine, I just wanted to give you a chance if you did, so thank you. If you wanted to get back to your seat, Mayor Ellsworth, I'm sure would
Yes,
make a path for you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, Mayor Ellsworth.
Good evening, Jeff Ellsworth from St. Helena, down visit.
Apologize for the outburst, I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
It's really gonna affect me if it goes.
Jeff Ellsworth, visiting from St. Helena, Mayor of St. Helena. I'm with Karina Arroyo, who has been helping me for the last 6 months. Karina is a recent UC Riverside grad who's just starting to apply to graduate school. And we are here tonight to invite you and the community to a community health forum coming up at the end of the month. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Arroyo.
All right, welcome.
Thank you.
Hello. We would like to invite people who may be interested in a community health forum. It'll be held on Thursday, January 23rd from 7 to 9 p.m. and on Saturday, January 25th from 10 a.m. to noon. The event will be held at the St. Helena Native Sons Hall. That's 1313 Spring Street in St. Helena. This event is being organized by Mayor Jeff Ellsworth of St. Helena. This is not an official city event, but one that Mayor Jeff felt would be helpful in sharing the resources available to the community. We will have a consortium of nonprofit, healthcare, and government agencies sharing information and resources on community health, children's health, and Blue Zone Health, which offers insights to the world's longest-lived cultures which embrace a lifestyle approach to health and well-being. The event is being held on 2 separate days, one weeknight and one weekend day. This is to be as inclusive as possible so all community members can attend. We will have an hour of speakers and an hour of tabling to answer questions and provide resource materials to the community. There will be a bilingual facilitator to share the resources in both English and Spanish. There will be resources and speakers on health and wellness, vaping, chemical and pesticide safety, children's health, Blue Zone Health, and other health issues. Thank you for your time, and for more information, please visit jeffellsworth.org. We also have flyers in both Spanish and English if anybody's interested.
Thank you. If you'd like to leave a flyer with Michelle, our clerk, you're welcome to do that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We have a little packet in both English and Spanish.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
See you up there.
Yes. Anyone else have an item not on tonight's agenda that you'd like to address? Seeing no others, we will move on to our consent calendar. I am going to pull item 6D for consideration of a couple additional sentences to the minutes of December 3rd regular meeting. So I'll entertain any other item. First of all, is there a request to pull any other item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar, items A, B, C, E, and F.
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? Okay, item 6D, as it relates to the regular meeting minutes of December 3rd, there were just two things that I wanted to add to the representation of the conversation. The first one had to do with a specific recognition that industry standard is, this relates to the cannabis conversation we had on that meeting date, and especially since the passage of Prop 64, industry standard language has changed from dispensaries to cannabis retail businesses. It was correct in the minutes that we repeatedly referenced dispensaries in our dialogue. However, what was not represented was when I specifically called out that that was a kind of an old term. The members of the audience that were from the industry acknowledged that. And so I just wanted to clarify that when we are talking about a cannabis retail business, that's there was some confusion and some discussion by the council about dispensary and retail. They're basically one and the same, and so it really was meant to clarify that the consideration that we were hearing related to a retail business that could potentially include what was traditionally and classically known as a medical dispensary. So I may not have said it clearly, but I'm hoping that that content, the added content, will help clarify what the council discussed. The other item I wanted to have represented that I feel was not in the minutes was the specific statement that I made that no action was being taken at that meeting, nor had there been any decision made by the council. And I wanted to clarify that because I know there has been representation that the council had already made a decision to move forward with a cannabis retail license or permit, and that is not the case. So I wanted just to make that clarification in the minutes to represent the conversation that the council had. So I'll hear from other council members if they feel like these two changes properly represent our conversation. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I do feel I had similar thoughts as I read the minutes because I think we spent so much time that evening talking about language and how precise we wanted to be that we wanted to try to capture that in the minutes because they are the only things that many people read. People don't frequently watch the video. So I actually, I agree that we did start out using the word dispensary, but what ended up in the minutes is town manager summarized council response and consensus direction regarding the type of retail below, adult recreation dispensary. That is not my memory of it. My memory of it is what we actually came up with was one cannabis, and we coined the phrase retail plus business. Because I don't, that's where I think we were by the time we actually got to giving real useful direction to staff. So I would like to see that, I think under that little, there are 4 bullets. I think the first bullet, which says adult recreation dispensary, could be combined with the last bullet, which says one cannabis retail entity, parenthetical dispensary, into just one bullet that says one cannabis retail plus business, because I think that's where we ended up.
Any other comments on either of the two additions of language that I am proposing? Councilmember Mueller?
Nope, fine.
No.
No? So is there support for the additional language for clarification?
Fine.
Certainly.
Okay. Do we need the head nods, okay, Michelle, or do you want?
Sure, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the amended minutes of the regular meeting on December 3rd.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is approved unanimously. Thank you. We have no presentations or public hearings on the agenda tonight. We do have a series of administrative regular items. The first one is a request for permanent art sculpture related to Yelmville Elementary School. So if we can all advance to that report. And Samantha, are you going to kick off this discussion?
I am, thank you. Mayor and Council, I'm here tonight with an item for discussion and possible direction regarding a request that has come forward to the Yountville Arts Commission for a possibility of a permanent sculpture project that would be in recognition of Yountville Elementary School. So as the council's aware, the school will be closing at the end of the current school year, which is June 5th. And although the decision on what will be happening with that property is not been decided yet, we do know that our school will be closing. Town staff was approached by the principal, Tara Bianchi from YES, to see what the process would be to bring forward an idea for a permanent sculpture in town that would some way memorialize the school. And it would be seen as a last project by the Yountville Elementary School PTA. So I brought Kimberly Cook, who's the chair of the Art Walk, in, and she met with the principal and Debbie Simpkins about how our process works for permanent sculptures in town. And we also shared some ideas for potential artists locally that might be interested in helping with the project. So the Arts Commission discussed the idea at their December meeting and agreed to bring this concept forward to the council for input before moving forward or proceeding further with exploring the project. They discussed the importance and desire of the community to memorialize what has been the cornerstone of Yountville since the late 1800s. And then also in some way the interactive nature of a fingerprint concept, which is something that was important to the school staff, parents, and children, could also assist in the community healing from what we will have as a loss of a school. The commission discussed the importance and need for the sculpture to be a quality design and cited, if it is cited, for a permanent placement on the Art Walk. So I just want to reiterate, we're in the very early stages of this. There's really no firm concept as to what the sculpture might look like or where it will be located. There are some ideas that the Yountville Elementary School PTA has discussed, such as the letters YES, but overall a desire to somehow incorporate current and past students' fingerprints into the sculpture. And that is really to mimic, if you haven't been to the school site, I did bring a couple of photos to share. And so around the backside of the school, dating back to 1994, probably earlier, but they painted the school in around 1994. Each graduating 5th or 6th grade class has placed their handprints on the walls. And it's very meaningful as this process has unfolded. It's one of the things that I have personally heard the most from current and past students is what's going to happen to my handprint. And so this could potentially be a way of inviting people to memorialize what is important to them there, because we don't know what will become of their handprint at this point. There was some interest in discussion about potentially placing, just to point here, this is one of the walls that shows the handprints, and every year they choose a different theme to go along with it, and so it wraps pretty much all around the back side of the school. So there was discussion about potentially placing the sculpture in front of Town Hall, as it served as the original school site before it moved to its current campus location. We have 2 empty pads here at Town Hall after the renovation project. But the school really and their representatives are open to whatever we see is the best fit. As the council is aware, you would if the process is something you're interested in and we moved forward, any permanent sculpture design would still come back to the full council for approval before moving forward. And with the permanent exception of if we accept a permanent sculpture, the council also has the purview to move or remove the sculpture at any time. So if we chose a site pending the outcome of the school and maybe in the future you felt like that would be a potential site for this type of sculpture, then it could always be moved. So currently, funding-wise, the school's PTA has pledged funding. There's another local nonprofit community service organization that is taking action, I think, tomorrow about coming on board to help raise funds for the project if it's something that we see is productive and the council is in support of. The PTA nor the school has not requested funds from the town at all at this point. They haven't asked for us to fund any of this project. But recognizing that your role as approving and accepting these permanent sculptures, we want to make sure that we get in front of you early to see if this is something you're interested in. And we wanted you to consider the following and provide feedback to staff, which is, are you receptive to the project, allowing the sculpture to be conceptually outlined and potentially permanently located on the town's art walk? If yes, do you have any specific concerns, criteria, or direction that you'd like to provide? And or do you wish to establish a working committee that would have 2 council members, 2 arts commissioners, 2 school representatives, or however you give direction as to we assemble that working committee, and that group could then move this process forward and bring a final product to the council. So really just looking for discussion and any input and direction that you might have. Also here tonight, Kimberly Cook, who's the chair of the Art Walk, and Jim McDonald, who's the chair of the Arts Commission. They may have a few things they'd like to add as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just start with, if either of you would like to add to the staff report. You've come all this way after all.
It's okay. Kimberly Cook from the Yountville Arts Commission. I just wanted to say that when Samantha and I were presented with this idea from the school, we were excited. Excuse me. And when we brought it to the full Arts Commission, all 7 members unanimously were excited and positive about it. I reached out to a couple artists just trying to get a feel for who might be interested or how much things would cost, just to start putting out feelers. And we have several artists that are very interested and supportive. So we hope that you would agree that this would be a fitting project to work together on, if you so choose, and a suitable way to recognize kind of a end of an era with the school. So I'm here if you have any questions, but thank you for considering it.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, would you like to share any additional thoughts?
No, I think Kim has really covered it, so that's good.
Okay. All right. So any questions of the staff report before I ask for any other public comment? Anyone else in the public like to comment on this? Or Samantha, did you? Oh, sorry.
That's right.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. The Town of Yountville Community Foundation, I know that the town hasn't been asked for any money yet, but is this the kind of group of people who the Community Foundation would not give them money, but is this the kind of group of people that the Community Foundation could assist with some sort of back office help in holding their funds that they raise, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So the PTA is established as a nonprofit currently. So if the project can be facilitated while they're still active, which I believe they have a certain amount of time after the school disbands, if at that point we haven't gone any further or there's some need to hold funds, the Community Foundation would definitely be a place that could facilitate that.
Right, thank you.
Samantha, would you say that this is a comparable process and potential working group similar to the Faces of Freedom sculpture? I know we had a little bit of a different makeup of the committee.
Yeah, I see it very similar. I do see this as being much shorter. I don't think that we'll necessarily have to do a full call in such a broad reach. I think we have identified, I know at least 2 local or regional, I should say, artists who are happy to really make whatever the design is that we come up with. And one actually had some existing designs where we have some creative ideas on how we might use an existing design and then integrate the fingerprints. So I'm not sure if it'll take as long, I guess, is my point. I don't see it as being as long of a process as that was. But a similar makeup of the group and opportunity, obviously, for the public to give feedback at the Arts Commission and the Town Council meetings as well.
So the working group would first go to the Arts Commission with concepts and early dialogue, vet that, have public engagement at the Arts Commission level, and then eventually make a presentation to the council.
That's how I see it unfolding, yes.
Okay. And we'll get to this, assuming that we move forward. 6 people on a committee makes me nervous, especially voting on art. Let's find an odd number somehow.
7 people.
7 might be better.
Okay.
But let's see
Maybe we get
if
a
we
kid.
get there. Any other questions from staff? Members of the public, anyone else like to comment on this item? Okay. Consideration by council. Anyone like to begin comment or action?
I'll start.
Councilmember Mueller?
I think it's a great idea, and just kind of thinking through with the concepts of the handprints. I think that's very symbolic in a lot of ways, very meaningful to Yountville and all the past students. I'd like to, maybe, I hate to use the word, think out of the box a little bit, but, we don't really have any art that's digitally interactive. And, maybe this is an opportunity to try something like that. We did this really fun thing when Bartisono was going in and had all the pictures of people who showed up and took photos. I'm sure there's a lot of class photos. We could take photos of some of the handprints, Great, 20 years from now, whatever digital media we use will be, out of date, but we'll figure that out then. So just an additional thought, instead of a traditional piece of art, to think about incorporating something like that. All kids like to touch buttons and flip screens, even your little ones. So those are my thoughts. I think it sounds like a great project. So you have my support.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker?
Well, I'm in full support, and I was really relieved when it was not fingerprint oriented, but handprint. It gave me a little chill when I saw fingerprint. So, no, I think that makes sense. So many times you see little kids doing their handprints. It's a wonderful thing. And I really like the idea of it being located here on one of the pads at the town hall. And I served on the ad hoc committee for the sculpture that we have for the Veterans Park. And I feel that personally, and I'm just saying it right out, that the town, we should support this financially as well. So that's my feeling about it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Well, I heard the first whisper about this a number of months ago from one of our local PTA dads that they were thinking about doing it, and I thought it was a great idea then. I think it's a great idea now. Unanimously excited so far. So, yeah, and I think however we need to structure it to make it work, I'm going to be fine with. One thing I would ask as we go forward is there a way to incorporate in some way, and maybe it's digitally, like Councilmember Mueller says, some of the existing art that we have, whether it's pieces of it or digitize it or something, because it is really cool, and it is really a piece of, truly, literally a piece of history. But yes, I'm in full support of the project.
Thank you. I support it also. This is a great idea, and there will be no shortage of ideas of what it should look like and what it should be made out of and where it should go. It could be interesting to try to incorporate some element of, if there is any original element of either this as the schoolhouse or that as the schoolhouse in some capacity. I'm going to leave it up to the artist to work on the details. And I think it's too early to identify a location or any other specifics. I think putting a working group together makes complete sense. It worked out, I think, very well with the Faces of Freedom sculpture that's in Veterans Memorial Park, and being open-minded to a variety of types of art. It, as you've already heard, one more contemporary example. It's not just bronze. It's not just any other kind of traditional sculpture. And I agree that there is probably some financial support that the town is going to be able to provide to add to this, similar to what we did with the mural, where we get private investment, because it also, not just to pay for it, but to have people have literal ownership of it. I think that also went very well, to invite private contributions so that individuals could support. Just keeping in mind, we don't know what's going to happen to the campus. The town may have some or all control of that campus going forward. We may not. We do have in mind potentially keeping a piece of it recreational. So it might mean that a location not in front of Town Hall could be just as appropriate. So I think we keep all options open. But I support it completely. Invite creating a working group, but I am in favor of an odd number, whatever that is. And I don't mean odd as in the people on the committee. I mean odd.
I might suggest you make it 3 school representatives. That would give you your 7.
Well, we also need to still define, and I'd be willing to leave it up to Samantha and the Arts Commission and those folks from PTA or school, whether we're talking about PTA parents, we're talking about school employees, people that have been invested in and very much a part of the school. I'm open to all that because I know there's a lot of passion and a lot of care that comes from not just the parents, but also past parents, employees that have been there for a long time. They all bring a unique perspective.
And that's where I say, if you go with 3 school affiliated, that would give you the ability to work through who those representatives are, PTA, staff, teacher.
As long as that includes parents.
The parents are part
child.
of the PTA. Yep.
Let's keep it fairly narrow.
Got it.
So that we can have all the appropriate perspectives represented.
Okay.
I would support a 7-member committee, and I think we can trust Samantha to put forth the right mix. If it's 3 school-related, I just want to make sure that we have understanding. It could be teachers, it could be other staff, it could be parents, PTA. Yeah, so
That's where I think it gives us a broad enough approach to work within that.
there could also be somebody that's not directly related to the school that has been supportive for many years. It's a resident of Yountville that we may also want to allow just a Yountville resident as that 7th person.
Yep.
So I feel comfortable leaving that in the hands of Samantha and the Arts Commission, if we can do that. If the council supports the 7-member committee to be at least formed and presented. If we need final approval, we can do that, but if we don't.
If you're comfortable, we can move forward. We would need the 2 of you who would be serving on that from a timely standpoint, and then we can get the Arts Commission appointees and keep going.
Okay, if 2 people want to volunteer from this council to be on this, I'd entertain, and it sounds like you're thinking limited, you mentioned, I think, 3 in the staff report, about maybe 3 meetings. It could be a few more than that.
It could be a few more if we evolve out, into something a little more technical. It could go a little longer. So,
Okay.
but
Anyone specifically interested in volunteering from the council? I know that Councilmember Durham's not here to represent himself. How quickly are you trying to move on this?
pretty quickly, because it is a little more difficult once their PTA dissolves. So I think we would try to have pretty much be going down this road by May on what it is looking like. I could come back at the next council meeting. It's
I'm
only
just
2
wondering,
weeks.
I have no idea if Councilmember Durham would be, wanted to be considered and wouldn't want to exclude him if he is interested.
Okay.
If we could maybe decide that at our next regular meeting.
Sure.
So that'd be
I
on the
think that's
21st.
fine. Our Yountville Arts won't meet until the first week of February, so that works out fine. I'll bring
Okay.
it back then.
So let's just have that as part of our January 21
Okay.
meeting. So council,
Sounds
consider
good.
that.
That's good.
Okay.
So you have the direction you need?
Yes, thank you very much.
Did we
Appreciate your
formally
time.
vote on this? Do we need to formally vote on this?
The only thing you are going to be voting on is appointing the 2 members, so we'll do that at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think we want to have a full council be able to consider that. Gary, did you have something?
No, I was just mentioning to Steve briefly the Brown Act requirements of the committee. So if it's just solely two council members, that exempts it from the Brown Act. Bringing other folks in as actual members of the committee will make it subject to the Brown Act. That's just making Steve aware of that.
Yeah. So we'll agendize and post any of the committee meetings.
So you're saying if it's 7 people, it'll be a Brown Act even if it's just 2 council members?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, so I believe you have unanimous support for this, even if we didn't formally say so.
Yes, I
We
got that. Thank you
unofficially
so
said
much.
so. Yeah. So looking forward to the Arts Commission helping move this forward. Thank you for being here. All right. Next up is item 9B, the Home Investment Partnership Program. We have some seats to change. Daniel's going to start.
Hello, Mayor. Hello, Council. Happy New Year. Tonight, we're asking you to consider for adoption a resolution authorizing application for home funds. These are administered by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. They've been used in Yountville primarily for our owner-occupied rehabilitation program. It's been ongoing for several years, and it helps finance home-based repairs for middle and low-income families in Yountville. Because of post-rehabilitation home value limits, program activity has been primarily located in Yountville's mobile home communities. And this program is administered by our partners over at the Housing Authority of the City of Napa, specifically Andrea Clark, who's here tonight. And I'm sure that she will be able to answer any questions that you may have with more clarity than I could. So that's all I have for
Okay.
you now. So if you have any questions.
Well, not for you, clearly.
Yeah, not for me, but happy to pass them along.
Well, Andrew, or Sandra, do you want to be a part of the actual staff report now, or do you want to comment later?
I think we should see what you want to talk about.
Okay, fair enough. Any questions of Daniel at this point? Councilmember Dornbecker, see, we do have questions.
So I just wanted to make sure that what you're asking us to do tonight is to agree that going after this funding is a good thing. Is that true?
Yeah, so this is providing us with a resolution that is a part of the application. It's a required part of the application.
And the application is due very soon, isn't it?
January 22nd, I believe.
Yes, so we need to be timely. Thank you. That's my question.
Any other questions, Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you for the report, Daniel. So these are dollars for rehabilitation, repair, that kind of thing.
Correct.
You foolishly sent us to the website, so I went there. And I saw there are also grants for new construction, which can apparently be used in a number of ways. Does this application cover any possibility of getting new construction dollars for affordable housing?
Well,
Or if not, can we make application under separate application, can we make separate application for affordable housing, new construction dollars?
I'll take that. The first answer is the application that we're doing is specifically for the rehabilitation. So that part.
So that's
the
a no.
second.
Okay.
The second part, though, is, and I would also say it's a very different application process and a very different evaluation. And we would need to have a specific project or partner for new housing construction. So we can take a look at what that would look like, but that may be something as we get further aligned down the road and we actually have a project or something to invest in. But we're not just, I will go out on a limb here and say, we're not going to be we're not going to score well with we'd like to have some money in case we build housing. You really have to have the project, a plan. We have to know who's going to live in it. But the answer to your question there is yes. In the future, if that is something we want to do, we can, and I think that would be something that the housing committee can look at as we move forward. But again, I think I shared with you earlier that was one of the possibilities that we may have looked at for rehabbing potentially when we were looking at 2180 Madison. So it's something more importantly, I would say, our Napa team is aware of, but the circumstances really have not played out that we have a project that meets the criteria, because these are scored. And if you may recall, we lost out on a cycle a little bit back because we're always challenged. Our income level is pushing, and it's also a project experience based. So the good news is we have expended the first 2 cycles, and we're going in. So I think we're establishing a good track record for what we're doing, and we'll certainly keep our eye open for new construction when it's appropriate.
So the new construction dollars, if we were to get a grant, cannot be used for the feasibility study that we want to do up at the Veterans Home. It's just actually stick and brick.
No, they're going to
Okay,
be.
thank you.
And I will also, and I will point out, we do have our SB2 grant we've received, which can be used for the feasibility study.
And planning, yeah.
And planning. And you've also allocated the potential under the Measure S for an additional 100,000 for other sites. So, I mean, I don't think we have an issue necessarily if we need to do some studies to try to understand how to resolve hurdles or something that's required.
I wanted to add to, as far as studies, there could be a possibility through the CDBG NOFA that will be coming out sometime this month. There's always planning studies planning dollars that are included in their NOFAs also. So that could be a source. But with regards to, yes, new construction, it's been my experience that you pretty much have to have the project shovel ready. So if I remember correctly, the Arroyo Grande Apartments has home dollars in that. And it takes many layers of financing to be able to put an affordable housing project together. And so you have to have all your ducks in a row before you even go to the application process. And the state has been really hammering that a lot this year because a lot of agencies were awarded funds and they haven't been able to get their projects off the ground, and so therefore they've had to deobligate the money and send it back to the state, when in essence there could have been a project that was ready and didn't get awarded. So yeah.
So before we let you away from the microphone, the 24% that could be used for staff costs, is that set by HCD?
Yes, it is. It's in the actual notice of funding that the owner-occupied rehab program, as far as the activity delivery, what it takes for our staff to go out and inspect the property and write up scopes of work and do all the loan processing, income eligibility, all of that. We have the work that we do to be able to get it a finished product. You're able to charge 24% of whatever the loan amount is as activity delivery. We've been averaging somewhere about 12%.
That was my next question. Yeah. So it's often that more of that 500 would be available, but you're allowed up to 24%.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So yes, you have a bucket of funds, and that can be used then for the actual loan and for the work, and then for the activity delivery. And then the state sets a limit as far as how much administrative funds that can be given to the city or the town for the actual administration of the grant. And that's set, I believe, at this $500,000, it's set at $12,500. And in the past, what we've done is we've split that between the town and the housing authority, where we charge 2/3 of that $12.50, and the town keeps the remaining 1/3 to be able to do what they need to do on your side of it as far as all the record keeping and
Sure.
et cetera.
Okay. Councilmember Dornbecker?
I wanted to thank you for this work because I know that it's important. There are some manufactured homes that are in need of repair. How do the residents there find out about these funds that are available?
That's a good question. So what we did in the past when the town has received funds is we've actually gone to the different mobile home parks. We've handed out flyers. First, we started out with the management, and then we actually went door to door, and then we held some homeowners meetings there on site. I think we even sent out some flyers in the water billings. We've sent out, we've done door to door in some of the other areas where we feel that maybe we could actually do the work. These dollars aren't relegated to just the manufactured homes. They can be used on any owner-occupied unit.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to find out. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, I'll call it, of the staff report collectively? No? Thank you, at least for now, in case we have any other questions come up.
Okay, very well.
Anyone in the public have a question or comment about this item?
Is income and age...
Billy, you know we need you up here, sorry. We all need to hear you.
It sounds, excuse me, Billy Hewitt, 9 Landy Way. My question is this based on income, affordability, age? What are those qualifications? That's my question.
Okay,
Thank
and then
you.
we'll have Andrea come back up to
Thank
the
you.
microphone. Thank you.
I knew I shouldn't have sat down. Yes, there is an income eligibility requirement for the assistance, and so you have to be considered at 80% of the median income according to your household size. And unfortunately, I did not bring that income table with me. But it is and the unit has to be owner occupied. There is no age limit or requirement. The homeowner can be of any age. Yeah.
I'll ask a follow-up question. Accessory dwelling units, that would not be considered owner occupied, or would it? If it's on the same parcel as a occupied residence?
So the funds cannot be used for accessory dwelling units. However, we're going to have a conversation in a couple weeks about the Cal Home notice of funding that's coming up, and there are some funds that will be available for that. I'm going to a training Thursday on that notice of funding so we can find out specifically how that might be able to be used.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the public? Andrew, since you're here, is there anything we haven't thought to ask you that you wanted to share, or we're asking for $500,000? I think we all are going to agree to do that.
So I think there was a comment, I don't know if it came from staff or from council, but there was a comment as to the town is eligible to apply for $1 million. However, we had recommended that you only apply for the $500,000. Just because I don't, and the state only gives you a small window of time. Generally, by the time you get into contract and actually get the program rolling, you only have about 2 years to spend the money. So we really don't want to ask for more money than what we can spend, because your competitive rating and ranking in the whole grant application is then you're judged on how well you administer previous funds and what has been your expenditure rate. And so you've got a really good record now, so we don't want to, tarnish that by asking for too much. Yeah.
That's a good point. Thank you.
And one of the reasons that the town was awarded a 2018 home grant. That application went in August of 2018. You were awarded the funds in February 2019. However, the contract has not been issued by the state yet. So the town does not have access to those funds yet. So we had recommended that because those monies aren't here yet and it's taking the state a long time to get those issued. We really recommended that you go ahead and submit an application for this NOFA round also to kind of get your monies lined up for the future.
Great. Another good
And I would just
idea.
echo, we've had a very effective, there is one element, the value of the property is also a consideration. So for some of our properties, especially the stick-built single-family homes, the property value could be too high with the renovations. We've had a lot of success in the mobile home park community. We continue to really spend a lot of time in those areas. We've also worked a little on Oakleaf Court. So we frankly do a lot of hand walking and putting the information and talking to people. And we actually, there's a flyer, if you were to walk out, there's a flyer on the lobby display area with this. But it's really a great program. We've generated about 1.3 million in the current, and we've exhausted. The other positive for the community is that this is, as you may recall, we've now established a fund. Some of these are will be repaid, and we've had a couple where they've either the occupants passed away and subsequently the home's been sold, or they sell it. Those funds come back into a pot that we're allowed to redistribute. So in some ways, we've now got a perpetual program, although it does take a while. And some of these grants are actually forgivable. There's a portion that may be forgivable based on duration. So it's a really positive thing for the senior community principally, and it's been something that I know staff and we appreciate working with the city of Napa because it's been very positive to go in and help a number of these homeowners.
Great. Thank you.
You're very
I
welcome.
think it might be safe for you to sit down now. Thanks. Council consideration, is there action?
I'd like to make a motion
Yes, please.
that we adopt resolution number 20-3963, authorizing the submittal of an application to the California State Department of Housing, excuse me, and Community Development for funding under the Home Investments Partnership Program.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. It's always good to see you, especially when we're going to hopefully get some money
Yes,
with your assistance.
absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Nicely done, Daniel. Moving on now to our next item, item 9C, Napa Countywide Bicycle Plan, the Yountville component.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar, members of the council. It is my pleasure tonight to present to you our component of the countywide bicycle plan. This plan was last adopted in 2012. Required a series of comprehensive changes. NVTA staff and agency staff has been working on this for a few years now. On November 21st, 2019, we took this plan to the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee for a
Sorry,
presentation.
Joe, to interrupt you. Maybe, Eddie, could you grab the door just, or maybe it's going to be quiet in a second. Thank you, Celia. We want to be able to hear you clearly, Joe.
I appreciate that.
You had some competition out there. All right,
Doesn't happen often.
please proceed. Thank you.
November 21st, we took this to the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, and they were unanimously, unanimously supportive of the plan as proposed. I think it's important to note that the majority of the policies in this plan will require more discussion should we decide to implement them or execute them. The advantage to approving this plan, our portion of the plan, is that in the future, if the town seeks federal or state funding for bicycle CIP projects or transportation-related projects, we can show the plan have been approved, and that is important in the planning sequence and the funding sequence. So if you look at the plan on the NVTA website, it has 11 chapters. The important chapter to us when we're discussing tonight is the Town of Yountville chapter, Chapter 8. These all have the same types of sections: goals and policies, existing conditions, the proposed bike network, the proposed programs, and the implementation strategies. I think it's important to know what the plan's vision is. To kind of simplify it, they're just looking to create a system that everyone can use, that's world-class, it's safe for all ages and abilities, and widely connected, and it's convenient. And they want to encourage everyday commuting and non-work trips along with recreational activities. Goal 1 is to serve the transportation needs of the entire community, regardless of age, income, or ability. So they're really this plan is really trying to get people who maybe ordinarily might not get on a bike out on a county road, but would maybe get out on a bike on a path or something that's a bit safer for them. Goal 2, again, reiterates that improving the safety in order to support all modes and serve all users. So whether you're using it to get to work or using it for recreation, or to get maybe a family member who wouldn't ordinarily get out on a bike, or a friend, that's the goal of the countywide plan. The last 2 goals, economic vitality, so there are some benefits to having an active transportation plan. As you see all the tourists that we notice on a variety of transportation modes here in the valley, including cycling. And bicycling is one of the most sustainable forms of transportation for 10 miles or less, so it does conserve the resources and use other resources to move people and goods. I think what they really talk about during what we have talked about extensively over our discussions in smaller groups, including the Transportation Advisory Committee, which we are members of, they talk about the comfort of cyclists or a potential cyclist. So there's a range of comfort for a typical cyclist. About 35% aren't interested in cycling at all. There are about 50% who might cycle if they could figure out a way to do it safely. They're a little more concerned about getting on and fighting for that same space as maybe a car or something else that doesn't make them feel as safe as other transportation. And then there's the other 10 or 20% that are pretty confident and can get out just basically on any road, and you see those types of cyclists out on a daily basis as well. Yountville Bike Network specifically, so we have the Vine Trail that is complete. The multi-use path, that lasts 1/10 of a mile, it's actually a little less than that. That's the section of Oak Circle Park path and the bridge that we are working on now to construct. There are some Class 2 bike lanes, and actually this is mostly complete. It was Yount Street that they're talking about as a Class 2, which has a Sharrow in front of us here on Yount. And then as you get further down Yount Street, it actually becomes a dedicated Class 2 with a real bike section on it. Bike Boulevard, that actually is this section here on Yount from Washington to Mount. And then the rural bike route is out on Yount Mill Road, so heading out into the county. This is a map of the sections, so it's a little easier to see what we have and what we were talking about. The main section on this section is the Vine Trail up to Yountville Community Park, and then Madison is a Class 2 that takes you all the way out into county. This is the Class 3, which is a Sharrow in front of us, and then after Mount Street it becomes a Class 2 with some dedicated bike lanes. And then this is the path, a multi-use path that we have behind the school that really isn't supportive of all cyclists, but for cyclists who may be trying to get into community center, community hall, or they're newer cyclists, younger cyclists. This is a perfect type of facility for them to use to get comfortable with cycling in an area that's free of traffic and relatively safe to ride on, as is this other little piece here in front of the Bardessono Hotel. And then this last piece is over from the Rancho de Napa Mobile Home Park out past the Hotel Yountville and right out to the edge of town at the Hotel Yountville where it ends there at Champaign. Let's see. So just this is just what the plan, if everything is built out as planned, which is not likely, but would be hopeful in a perfect world. Right now, we have about 142 miles countywide of bike route, bike path, and bike lane. And the goal would be to have that 585 miles of bike facility, whatever that would be. So the majority of the improvements, as you can see, are in the rural bike routes, so stuff that's out in county, and then some of the bike lanes, the Class 2, in some of the other areas in Napa and some of the other larger communities that are can support that type of infrastructure for cyclists and other users. And with that, I would like to say that what we're asking you tonight is to approve the final version of the plan as approved by the NVTA board and approve the reso as proposed. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I don't really have, I mean, they are substantive, but they're not sort of picky fat questions. Just to make sure the document is correct, it talks about Yountville Elementary School a couple of times in there, and I think that we might be well served to add that as far as we know, the school is closing, but we don't know what the repurpose of the property is. It also indicates that our general plan process is not complete, but it is, so maybe that change. And it also indicates that the Yount Street bike lanes are not complete, but they are. So I would ask that we do that cleanup with NVTA.
Absolutely, and we've been in contact with NVTA throughout this process, and we will get that cleaned up, and we have their commitment to get that cleaned up.
And
Councilmember Mueller?
since we have little details, Napa Nook Road is 2 words.
Okay.
Joe, on page 128 of the document, but on page 13 of our digital, it lists community input, and there's some bullet points here about respondents providing comments. How does that factor in here? These just get presented as part of the Yountville component. It says community input at the top of the page, and then it lists improvements requested for intersection of Vine Trail.
And I'm sorry, Mayor, that was on page?
Printed page 128, but 13 of 20 in our digital file.
I will have to check, but I believe those comments have been incorporated. We discussed a lot of these comments with NVTA staff. Some of them had some merit, and others we responded to them and let them know that some of these things aren't within our purview, and the ones that were, we would address and try to incorporate into the plan.
Okay.
And also this reflects and documents, they did hold a workshop here in Yountville specifically for this purpose.
Okay. Good, thank you. That explains it. Any other questions of staff report?
I would like to say one other thing, Mayor. Those comments weren't all from residents. There were some cycling enthusiasts who attended the meeting here and represented that, not necessarily from town, just so you know.
We know we have a lot of outside.
Yeah, the Napa Bike Coalition was a group that kind of keeps hammering those same points, and we talked to them about them, including them wanting to be on some areas that there just isn't enough room to have cyclists. Washington is one that people who aren't from here keep asking for, and we try to explain to them there's not enough room for the parking, the cars, and cyclists to do it safely, and we would prefer to have them on Yount. And we have the Yountville Mile built with Weber as a connecting road, and we would prefer that you use that, and that's the route that we set up. So that was kind of the comment and the discussion that we had with a couple of the members of that group.
Great, thank you. And any kind of funding for any of the elements to be determined as projects come forward in the future?
That's correct. As is our policy, nothing happens without the approval of the council. So whatever project we have that comes forward, whether it's a street, bike infrastructure, or other multi-use path, we have several opportunities for you all to weigh in and voice your opinion so that we can get the project you want at the time you want, and have it the way you all prefer.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker?
I Hi, Joe. I do have one question about funding. How much funding have we invested in it so far?
In bike path, I think the Yountville Mile was,
I think that's an interesting question to answer, Councilmember Dornbecker, because it covers a long period of time. But the Yountville Mile is,
I think it was $1.5 million of our money, wasn't it?
you know, well, it was about $1.6 million in total, of about $1 million, which was a grant that we received. So we had about hard capital, $600,000 over several years. But we've also put in, and it's been consistent with our general plan and our park and rec plans, you know, we have a strong path system. So that path system was initially built, and as you know, we're currently working on modernizing the path and replacing some of the asphalt with concrete. So what I would say, you know, the town probably, conservatively, is probably, when you put all of that together, well over $4 million over a decade. But I want to put it in that perspective. It's not that we went out and spent $4 million, but we've been doing incrementally, and we've also been improving. As Joe was alluding to when you looked at that, we're nearing build out. So our system now is going to be fine-tuned a little. It's going to be enhancing, maybe responding to changed conditions over time, but you're not going to see a whole lot of significant new construction, especially once we finish the gap. You probably will see us work on replacing some of the asphalt on some of the multimodal paths with concrete, just because that has a longer life cycle. But the good news is there's a portion of our Measure T that is eligible for that. So in some cases, we actually will have a funding source to help us. And I would say this is something Joe and I have talked about a little bit. You know, some separation on Yountville Crossroad, if we could figure out how to squeeze it in to make that safer, might be. But that's a challenging one at that point. But really, we don't see a whole lot of a major path network changes.
And I will say that even out of that $4 million, a lot of that was grant money, and you know, R&D built a piece of that path when the developers have contributed. Some of it is existing roadway that we're just striping in a different way, so it's not always hard dollars that are going to dedicated bike paths. And just to kind of build on what the town manager said about our multi-use path, Measure T, a component of Measure T is spending 6.67% of other funds, not Measure T money, on bike facilities. So we have chosen to use those here in town rather than let that money go into a county pool, and we're creating concrete paths that are more durable, aesthetically more pleasing, much easier to maintain, and make better use of the funds here in town rather than let them go out and be used in county, which we think is a better use of our funds.
Well, I do have to say that I'm not a bicycle enthusiast, but I was at the Napa Valley Marathon board meeting last night, and they were talking about all the runners who use those paths too.
Yeah.
And so, to me, that's a multi-use, and
It is
that's a good
multi-use,
thing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Veterans use it. There's dog walkers. I mean, it's a variety of use. Cyclists are the least of the users, but we make it wide enough so that it can qualify for that 6.67% funding source or use source, and it just provides a better path system for all of our users.
Great. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I think that's why they're really going with active transportation, not just bike path.
That's correct.
Because it
That's-
is very
that's the correct
much
term.
multimodal.
And walking is also active.
Yeah.
Okay, any member of the public have anything to share or questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and see if there's action to be had by the council. Somebody want to either discuss or make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 20-3964, approving the town of Yountville component of the Napa countywide bicycle plan. And great job for all of our staff who's contributed quite a bit of time to the project, even though that's not in the resolution. That's just a
I'll second.
add-on.
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
Thank
Passes
you all.
unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's see. I think we're going to invite up our finance manager.
Actually, I want to make a correction, as that was the staff
Finance
report was
director.
put together before the agenda change, and it's my pleasure to introduce your new finance director, Celia King.
Yay.
I was waiting for Steve to make that recognition. Thank you. But this does mean you realize that you have to stay here for all the meetings all the time. Okay, all right. Welcome, and we look forward to your report. Let's make sure that, are you green?
I'm green now.
There we go.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Eddie, am I driving? Okay, thank you. So, if this works. Here we go. Okay, so tonight we'll discuss the possible reallocation of unassigned fund balance in the general fund. To summarize, the year-end financial report for the general fund for fiscal year 18-19. The town received $1.6 million more in revenue than it had budgeted. It spent $1.1 million less in expenditures than budgeted, which resulted in $2.7 million of savings generated in the general fund. So at the end of the fiscal year, June 30, 2019, the total general fund balance was $4.2 million. And if you take into consideration the reserve allocations shown here that were adopted for the 1920 budget, it leaves the general fund with an unassigned fund balance of $2.8 million. So the town currently has healthy reserve balances, as you can see. We do continue to contribute monthly to the OPEB and PRSP trust funds based on the adopted contribution amounts for this fiscal year. And the emergency reserve fund and revenue stabilization funds that were created last fiscal year, they are earning a fair amount of quarterly interest now that they are in their own fund. So some suggested reallocation ideas are $1.5 million into the capital projects fund for the potential purchase of the Yountville Elementary School property, should that become an option. An additional $400,000 investment into the OPEB trust fund to help with long-term costs of retiree health premiums. An additional $400,000 investment into the PRSP trust fund to help with costs associated with the CalPERS unfunded actuarially accrued liability. $250,000 put into the two replacement funds, Facilities Repair and Replacement Fund 81 and Fleet Tools and Equipment Repair and Replacement Fund 82. And the result of that would bring both of the balances in those two funds to over $1 million. An alternative option to the first one would be using $1.5 million to do an additional discretionary payment towards the CalPERS unfunded actuarially accrued liability. Another alternative would be to assign the entire $2.8 million to use towards the purchase of the Yountville Elementary School. And then, of course, discussion of any other alternatives or ideas that might come up tonight, or if there's any other combinations of the ideas you see here that you would like to do. And then it is definitely an option to leave the unassigned in the general fund as it is until council decides to take action at a later time to reallocate it. So if there are any questions at this point, or if you'd like to discuss any other options.
I bet there will be questions.
I'm waiting for questions.
Councilmember Moeller.
All right, I like all your options and options to the options. That's
By the way, before you start, isn't this a nice problem to have as you
It's a
take
great
over
problem to have, yeah. It's
finance
good
director?
news.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mueller.
All right, so At least to me, the elephant in the room is the Yountville Elementary School project. There's been some numbers thrown out by some people about what the possible cost might be. So if we put it into actually capital projects and earmark it for that, and we end up for some reason not purchasing it, that can easily be taken out and redistributed at any time, correct?
I believe, yes, it can come
And
back to the general
also,
fund.
likewise, if we just left it in the general fund, in case, we might have a unanimous opinion, or at least a majority opinion that, we do want to reserve that, because, we might know something, I'm hoping, at least in 2020, about what's going to happen with the disposition of that property. We could always just take it out of the general fund at that time, so we don't.
Correct.
So those options are certainly viable. We really have a lot of latitude with this money, is what you're telling us.
Definitely.
Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
Good.
With regards to that, Councilmember Moeller, I think typically staff brings you several options and ideas towards goals that you've established. And I think that's why recognizing we do have a potential out there. You're absolutely correct. If we leave the money, we just simply and wait for the 90 to 120 days to see what direction the school may be going, then you just defer action to a later point, or you may have a pot of money that significantly can help fund the purchase if that's a direction that the council chooses to go at that point in time.
Thank you. Other questions of the report?
Um,
Councilmember Dornbecker?
After this summary of, what we could do to allocate, I really, math was never my strong suit, so I'm saying would there be additional discretionary funds that would be left in the general fund to do something like support the art project for this, for the school and things like that?
I believe if you do the first 5 options, so 1.5 million to the capital projects fund, 400,000 each to the trust funds, and 250 to the replacement funds, it leaves about $66,000. So these are all kind of rounded numbers, so it doesn't eat up the full 2.8 million. So there would be a small amount left.
And I'll also bring the council to the fact that we also have approximately 468,000 allocated budget contingency around. So this would be a case where you would go potentially to use that if you wanted to do something that wasn't in the budget. So we have the capacity to participate in funding a potential sculpture if that's the council's direction.
Elsewhere. Funding elsewhere.
Yeah.
Correct.
I have a follow-up question to that, and that question is, since we are going into the budget process very soon for 2020, 2021, doesn't it make more sense to hold off and see what we might need to look at while we go through the budget before we go ahead and allocate to specific things?
The council has historically used this. The reason I think that's a great question, Councilmember Dornbecker, but when we bring our budget forward, what we're talking about is we've completed the year with this amount of money left, and then you still have your various reserves that the finance director shared with you. And that's why we don't necessarily recommend that you allocate everything. But as we start the budget process, we are looking at what I call here's what your revenue coming in are for the annual basis. Here is what your expenditure plan. So, I mean, absolutely the council could choose to sit and put the 2.8, but it stays there. For our purpose, if you want to move it and have it go for a purpose, this is why we allocate it. Otherwise, it just sits there. And in prior conversations, the council has provided direction that they do not want a large unassigned fund balance, that they would like it brought down so that they know where it's going. So I'm just saying neither's wrong, but I will guarantee you that when we start the budget process, the revenue picture that we have and the expenditure picture will come back with a balance, because that's my responsibility to bring you a balanced budget. But I think, again, you'd be sitting there and looking at it. So in some cases, it's helpful to, if you will, close out the year, know where you wanted the money to go. And what you would hear, and in fact, if you may recall 7 or 8 years ago, the recommendation was that we kept a little higher unassigned fund balance because of budget uncertainty. You may recall, we now have, I mean, for many of you, there were years where we didn't have, the Revenue Stabilization Fund is, I won't say it's new now, but it's not a long-term. I mean, so we've gone a long way in our reserve planning process. So from a contingency standpoint, we start with the town manager has a contingency of 45. Then you have the annual budget contingency of about 468,000. Then you would have the Revenue Stabilization Fund, just a little over 2 million, and the Emergency Reserve Fund at 2 million. Each of those, based on policies adopted by the council, have specific rules, restrictions, and what they can be used for, with the Emergency Reserve Fund being the most restrictive and requiring that the council currently declare a emergency. So as the manager, I'm a little more, to give us the most flexibility, that's where we've created the Revenue Stabilization, because the Revenue Stabilization Fund could allow us to offset, let's say, a slight downturn that we weren't planning in our TOT revenue, or a project that you wanted to do that ended up coming in a bit more. So it's just where you go. But the short answer to your question is yes, and we periodically answer this question back and forth, but then it starts looking at, and it can be confusing to the public, which is why you're talking about revenue of, 3 million more than we're taking in. So it avoids some double counting and looking at where people are going, but either is an appropriate mechanism.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, and thank you for the report. So Funds 81 and 82, which we spun off from Fund 50, the capital fund, are going to have, if we would go with this recommendation, would have a little over $1 million each in them. At what point are those fully funded?
That's what
Because we put quite a bit in last year, and this would be quite a bit this year.
That's what we're working on tightening up this year. The fleet and tools is possibly pretty close to being fully funded. The facilities and repair and replacement fund, we really need to tighten up. What is considered in that facilities repair and replacement fund, and what are the dollar amounts that will be needed to fund that repair and replacement going forward. That one will need obviously a bit more than Fund 82, fleet, tools, and equipment. We're hoping to tighten that up a little bit, hopefully by the end of this fiscal year.
Thank you.
To give a clearer picture of what is truly needed in those funds.
Then on the OPEB and the PERCEP trusts, I think you told me that the most recent actual figures we have on that are from June 30th, 2018.
Yes, the CalPERS valuations are always 1 year behind, so that last valuation was from June 2018.
And we are looking at having another valuation done as of June 30th, 2020. We're forward-looking to doing that.
So the OPEB valuation will be done this fiscal year for 2020. The next CalPERS valuation will come out in July, and it will be as of June 2019.
Okay. And once we put something in the OPEB or the PERCEP, it cannot come back out,
It's
correct?
irrevocable trust. It can be used, I believe, Steve, if it's for the OPEB or pension purpose.
But we could not repurpose it.
Correct.
For anything else. Okay. And then, did I understand you to tell Councilmember Dornbecker that we would have 66,000 left?
Approximately 66,000.
And then, but we would continue, hopefully, to get our revenues every month that we.
Of course.
So we would continue adding to that 66,000.
Adding to it,
by new revenue, our revenue streams ongoing.
no. So this is unassigned fund balance from the end of last fiscal year. So we won't know what our unassigned fund balance is at the end of this fiscal year until we close the fiscal year in August or September and we see our revenues versus expenditures. So at that point, it will be a new unassigned fund balance amount.
So, okay, sorry, I just have a checking account. So I'm thinking if I have $66,000 in my checking account, aside from it being a good day, then every paycheck I get increases the bottom line when I deposit it. So would we continue to get deposits in my checking account analogy?
No.
Where does the
This is last year's
66?
checking.
Yeah.
This is last year's, and
okay,
we're
I got-
closing
that
it
tells me all.
out. What
This
I would
checking
like
account
to
is
say,
closed.
yeah, well, think of
Okay.
it as a closing out, and then you've got
Got
a
it.
new checking account for this fiscal year. But what I will say, if you follow and we provide you the monthly financial report, you can track. Right
Okay.
now, our
this
revenues
is-
are exceeding,
This is old news, got it.
we are
We're expecting
exceeding.
to have another unassigned fund balance for
Right.
this fiscal
Yes.
year.
But
Yes.
perhaps, what I will caution, I do not think it will necessarily be as large as this unassigned fund balance. When Celia and I were looking at the analysis, obviously there's several factors. One is, we continue to budget conservatively on TOT in part because we recognize that it's a volatile, and we also recognize that we are in the luxury high-end market, and if it drops, it can drop quickly. So we were fortunate to have a rather large, and even by my conservative standards, it was more than I expected. The other thing that we saw was we're finally seeing some of the assessed valuation from the sales of the Vintage Estate, the Bardesano, and the Hotel Yountville fully booked on the property tax. So that base should continue. And then we had a very small ERAF this year. As you know, some years the ERAF portion has been larger. And we also have received, because of activity level, a bit more building permit fees and structures. Building permit fees are sort of, some years we book a lot of money and then we incur some of the fixed costs the year after. So we have to adjust a little bit for that. And then also, in general, we stay fairly conservative with our budgets. But that's why I'm saying I'm not going to go out here and tell you that you're looking at another 2.8 next year, because I don't think you are.
And just a couple more on the two trusts. Each of them is somewhere between 72 and 75% funded as of our last snapshot, correct?
The CalPERS last snapshot was 72.9% funded. The OPEB, I think, is closer to 70.
Okay. And so those come in at, I think one of them's the unfunded gap, one of them's $1 million and one of them's $1.2 million or $3 million. And we're looking to put 400,000 in each of those. So that would decrease our unfunded liability by about a third, we would hope.
Correct.
Okay.
And I would also, with regard to those two, I want you to feel really good about where you're at position-wise with the 70 and 73%, because we're still making an annual contribution each year in our budget. So we're growing that. So that's why if you were to choose and hold and put the money towards the potential purchase of the school, you're not hurting the organization's ability. We're still going to fine tune. We'll still need some additional funding to fully fund the OPEB and the pension, but compared to many other communities, we're significantly there. And I think you could also see you're in striking distance to being fully funded on a couple of those. And, as the facilities repair and replacement fund is relatively new, part of the reason we've got a bigger variable there is when you look at something like a roof or an air conditioning unit that may have a 20-year life cycle, we've just started funding those, but some of those may be 10 or 15 years old, and we haven't been putting the annual increment in. So that's one of the reasons we really want to do a little bit more detailed analysis. But yes, you're in a very good fiscal position, as the mayor was alluding to. This gives us an ability to better position, And in prior years, the council actually, you took action to, I mean, this is how we started our OPEB trust, if you go back 8 or 9 years ago. And it's also how we built the Revenue Stabilization Fund. You all have provided good support so that we don't hurt ourselves in our annual budget. We do some of this based on how well we've performed, which makes it easier and avoids the really challenging situation of having to do belt tightening or negative adjustments during a fiscal year. So, I mean, you guys get a lot of credit for where we're at.
Any other questions? Councilmember Moeller?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to phrase this in terms of a question. That's really what I'm trying to do. But in terms of these two, the CalPERS and the OPEB fund, again, these are based on the CalPERS discount rate.
Correct.
And am I correct? Because we've had to, it's been adjusted by the state because they overestimated how much money they were going to bring in. And so they discounted it down. But now, and if everyone can remember that it's just been banked from 2018. We've had very positive stock growth years in 19. We haven't booked that value. I think the outlook so far, you can't really predict the future for 2020 is also good. So I think that even though we've kind of talked about these million numbers, these are soft numbers based on the current discount rate.
Yes.
And I'm more optimistic based on I don't even have to be optimistic what I saw last year. That's in the bank, if you will, and also in 2020. So those $1 million numbers each could well be a lot less than $1 million that were underfunded. Is that correct?
That is correct. Okay. And I was actually going to make a comment to Councilmember Dorman's comments about those trusts. Is if we put in an additional $400,000. We can say right now at this moment in time, we have $1 million liability. If we reduce it by $400,000, it looks like it's $600,000. But that's a moment in time, and these change every year. And like you said, it's based on performance. That $1 million liability could go down, it could go up. So it is prudent to keep putting away for this, to cover that and try to fully fund if possible. But it is something that we can't really predict how it's going to do. We can just keep taking steps to try and fund as much as possible.
Okay.
But on the other hand, we've got some years that we haven't really seen the benefit from yet. So you can pretty much count on a couple years that $1 million really going down. But what happens after that is more.
And I'm going to speak to that when we get to our discussion,
Okay.
Because some information from the League of California Cities addresses that very point.
Right.
I want to get to one question I have, and I'm going to alert Joe that it might be a Joe question if, Celia, you haven't memorized the entire budget and every line item yet.
Almost.
Water line replacement monies. That's not in the Facilities Repair and Replacement Fund, correct?
None of the enterprise fund
You're in the
projects.
general fund, yep.
The reason I ask is that's something that we need to be looking at, and we have a potential project that isn't fully funded. And should we be looking at that in this scenario through the budget process or through the budget process?
That would be more of a budget process.
Okay, that's it.
But I would
That's
also,
cool.
no, I've got a good answer for you. I
That's
know-
a good answer right there. I'm ready to move on. That's the answer. We don't have to worry about it right now.
Right.
But we will worry about it in our 24 workshops that we're going to have
Correct.
when we talk about the budget. That's good, Steve. See, you said the right thing. My other comments will be comments, not questions. So that's all I have for right now. Any member of the public have any questions or comments? Okay, further discussion.
Okay.
I do want to get back to Councilmember Mueller's point. I was going to bring up one thing that was, I would say, very thoroughly discussed in the Finance Committee of the League is about not overfunding because of that activity. That if you think you're fully funded 100% to the point in time dollars, and that goes down, nobody's giving you your money back.
Nope.
So we want to be comfortably funded, but not funded to the point where we have overfunded and lose that value, and then it's almost wasted.
And I would also, Mayor, to your point, that's one of the reasons we've had a number of policy discussions about using the trust and then making payments from the trust rather than doing the direct payment to PERS. For that very reason, it gives us the most control of the money, especially as a small agency and a pooled share.
I mean, most cities are nowhere near 70+%. They're probably in the 20 and 30, Gary, you might, if that, right, so.
There are negatives.
Yeah, some unfortunately are negative, and they may avoid insolvency because of the last 18 months of activity, but still structurally, they have a real serious problem. I bring that up to just caution that we may not want to overfund those yet, because we have a very timely situation about the school property site. And I think it would send a very strong message about how serious we are and how nimble we could be to move on a potential purchase of that site if we have funds allocated. That can be reallocated if circumstances don't present themselves that we can finance. So I'm getting to the point where, and I'm opening it for discussion, that 1.5 million toward a potential purchase is not enough in this 2.8. I would even hesitate to, well, in my opinion, I'd shift numbers 4 and 5, the 250 each for, don't listen, Joe, facilities repair replacement fund and fleet tools and equipment repair. I'd move that into the number 1 and make it 2 million. And then still have a conversation about whether putting 400,000 each into the pension rate stabilization program and OPEB, or if we want to put a lower number than that and put even more money in that, and maybe it's 2.5 million that's sitting there ready to act in a very short time frame if that opportunity arises.
And if you look at the alternative, it's the second to the bottom. And that's why we've identified that this could be of interest to the council. We've anticipated that you may just want to hold and not take any action, and then we have the money ready. And then if we know where we're going and we don't, the school is used for a school purpose or something else, then we come back and have the reallocation discussion and take your feedback on these different options. But we are in a fortunate situation where if you were to look at this potential pot of money, plus the potential if we were to use some of the Measure S fund for potential affordable and workforce housing, you could, we can put together a sizable payment towards that site. So I think if the council is interested in that, staff is very comfortable with just having you hold that fund balance until we have resolution of Yountville Elementary School site.
Would you rather have it in the general fund as it is currently, or would you rather have it in a dedicated holding?
Holding is fine where it's at.
Okay.
Another reason to hold off a little bit is we could do the further analysis of the replacement funds and maybe come back and let you know a clearer picture of what is really needed in those funds, which might then affect how much is transferred into them.
And I think it's fairly obvious, but if you do choose to spend it on the school, then the other options kind of go away. Just want to make sure that it's
in this
year
pot of money.
In this pot of money.
And then when the vice mayor opens a checking account.
Right. We will have a smaller pot of money next year to do this same exercise with.
Right. I'm comfortable holding it all 2.8 and for now. Councilmember Mueller?
Well, I strongly support that because based on my last question, if you will, I think putting this money into these pensions right now, we can always do it at a different time, but with the change in that discount rate, I really want to see what kind of shift that's really going to do. It could be quite substantial and almost zero out those balances. So I definitely don't want to move those in now.
Which would also be a temporary condition.
I totally, it could be, who knows? maybe we're at the end of the bull market, maybe we're not. I don't really know. But having, any of those, earmarked that we can move in when they need to go in, I'm fine with. But keeping this money for potential with the school, I strongly recommend that, at least in the short term, until maybe we'll know something in 180 days. For the other two buckets, yeah, as you said, I think, let's get some more information there. But even then, I really, that this, putting this money into the school just makes the most sense because we need it potentially. It could be a number that's easily double this, and we still have that shortage. On the other hand, if we do have that opportunity, interest rates are very cheap. And it's kind of like a free lunch, even though we've got this to borrow against, which might be a very smart thing to do because interest rates are so cheap. Then we can really come back and talk about all that. But right now, to be able to move on something quickly and at least have potentially 50% in the bank to show to move faster than somebody else, you don't know how that's going to work out. I just think it's very prudent for us to do right now.
Okay.
So I totally support, and where it goes is so what you're saying is it would be number 6, the ADP.
I think what we're saying is we take no action.
Yeah, it would be the very last sentence, leave unassigned fund balance.
Oh, it's on the next page. There we go. How about that? The unassigned,
We leave it where it is, the 2.8. I mean, that's the discussion right now. We haven't finished it, but that's what we're talking about.
I do think, Mayor, to your point, to send a message, you might want to use the clause that you're holding off on that so that you have the funds available to apply towards the potential purchase, should that be required.
Well, that's why I was asking, would it be better to just change the line item to state that even more explicitly?
That's kind of my preference, is to give it some kind of terminology that says, at this moment, it is earmarked for this possible purchase.
You can add that into the resolution, and we can do that.
Plenty of waffle words in there, but yeah, to say, look, we put this in the bank, we're serious.
Okay.
Councilmember Dornbecker, your thoughts?
Well, I agree that we should put this aside and hold on to it in case we are going to make a move on that property.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I completely concur. I would like to see, if we add a line item to the general fund, I would like to see it be broad enough for any kind of housing. Because it may be, I would like for it not to be just limited to yes, because an opportunity may come by before that happens. We may want to hang on to it and see. So I just think that's the idea that I have, is we would hold on to it for some kind of housing, including purchase of or development of the yes property.
I feel like we have other buckets that we can pull for housing opportunities that might come up. I think we have such a short window for holding the 2.8 for this particular condition that I would rather it not be kind of diluted to include housing. We don't know what might happen to the property. Even if we're able to purchase it, we're not sure what's going to happen on that property. It may or may not include a housing component. But we do know, I think, even though I don't believe the appraisal that we have heard reported from the school district is accurate, it is going to, it's a valuable piece of 6.8 acres in Yountville. 2.8 million is not going to be enough to purchase it already, whatever that number is. So I think if we can dedicate it to the potential purchase of that site so that we have even more control over what happens to that property, I support that over these next several months, and that can be redistributed to housing or anything else after we get some clarity on the future of that property.
If the council would, I have a proposal for you on a change to the resolution, if you want to move to the resolution. I would suggest that we make the following change to the now therefore 1. Allocate the available unassigned fund balance of $2,886,076 for the potential purchase of Yountville Elementary School site. Strike 2, strike 3, strike 4, strike 5, strike 6. Add a new number 2 that says the council will revisit potential allocation should the school district site purchase not move forward. And then number 7 will become your number 3.
I agree.
Can't,
Mayor Moeller?
so couldn't we just do, even though we pass this, give me time to think about this. Even though we pass this, I'm fine with changing number 1 to put it all in a potential school site fund, but to say in here we're going to come back and revisit it, do we need to do that now, or can we go back and amend a resolution later that if we just say we're putting it there now?
It's, what I'm going to say is it's one way or the other. I mean, if you want to come back and modify it, what you're basically saying is if you don't use it for the purpose of purchasing the site, you're going to come back and reallocate. So you're going to do that one way or the other.
Right, but just to,
I think-
I'm fine with keeping it simple and just putting it in
I was just trying to
there.
answer the question that what if it doesn't go to the school site? I'm trying to have the document be very clear that it will come back so that everybody knows that the council would have to make another decision about that if it wasn't used for the school site. That was the only intent in that.
I think town manager has it right to just be explicit in the same document that if not used for this purpose, it comes back for reconsideration and reallocation by the council. Thoughts?
I'm good with that.
With no time or anything, just whenever.
No?
Correct. That way we let the process lay out. I think we'll know where we're headed, hopefully in less than 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
I can go with acquisition and/or development. I mean, I know we're not making a decision to purchase tonight, but by calling something, I'm allocating this to the purchase, that's, pretty good intel. I mean, because what if we don't want to buy it? What if we get a developer that says, I want to buy it, and I want you to give me a loan to help do the housing?
Now you're going down a whole different area. That's going to require a whole different, that's not
But maybe we want to use the
development
money for that.
But I'm just saying to be perfectly.
I would suggest that if that's the case, we revisit this. We
Because
don't,
to me,
Well, I'm very skeptical of allocating money to purchase something when we don't really even know what it is. But if you are telling me we have sufficient wiggle room that we can say no for any reason, no reason,
I would,
then
because
that's okay.
the second part that you're bringing up, Vice Mayor, really gets into an area that would require a whole lot more analysis. When we enter into potentially a development agreement or a funding, that's a very different animal, and not knowing what that looks like. So, but if we didn't purchase it, then certainly, and something was to come forward, then that, when you look at your potential reassignment at that point in time, that might be where you could say, I want to look at doing something differently.
yeah.
okay. So this is not a decision to purchase the property.
No.
In any,
You're
I just want
basically
that on the
saying-
record.
You're saying that you.
I felt that I knew that, but I want to make sure I do
No,
that.
I mean, at some
Okay.
point.
I'm going
I'm
to go
down.
ahead
I'm good.
and make a motion.
I'm good.
Using the language that town manager presented. Michelle, is that clear?
And I'll second.
You want to read it back just so we're all sure, or are you good?
I'm good, I have it recorded.
Basically,
Allocate the available unassigned fund balance of $2.86676 million for the potential purchase of the Yountville Elementary School site. Delete 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Add a new number 2. The council will revisit potential allocation should purchase of yes not go through, which will become new number 2, and then number 7 will turn into number 3.
as moved and seconded.
Right.
Thank you, Michelle. Any further discussion, or all in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, that passes unanimously.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's move on now to Town Council protocols update.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. The next item is our town council protocols. And in the interest of time, I'm going to be brief with the staff report and identify that there are new sections to the protocols. There's a mandatory training section added, electronic communications policy added to support new town-issued board and commission emails, local government advocacy section, iPad tablet standard and stipend section, professional development, town-issued email for board and commissions, annual meeting with Yountville Board, Commission, and Committees, official town communications, council members representing majority versus individual opinion, and official town communication, which deals with distribution of information and press conferences. There are a number of updated sections within the protocols that are identified in the staff report, but quite lengthy to call out individually. This process for updating the protocols started in February 2018, and changes were made from that meeting, and then they were subsequently presented to the Council Ad Hoc Committee, which consisted of Mayor Dunbar and Councilmember Moeller, and they held meetings on April 18th, March 29th, and reviewed by email June 4th and June 5th. And we are back here this evening to present the Town Council protocols for adoption and receive any comments for additional changes.
Thank you. Comments regarding questions? Let's start with questions, and then if there are comments for additional changes. Any questions of clarity? I mean, it has been a fairly lengthy process to get to where we are. Are there any suggested modifications or additions? Councilmember Moeller?
Only part that kind of stuck out to me after working on this extensively, and I'm trying to, maybe somebody else can find it faster. We do talk in here about the salary for town councils, but it's very specific language, and I kind of looked back over the history of this. We tend to update it like every 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And so this language will be, if I can find the section, out of date kind of next year. And I was wondering if we could come up with something a little more generic. I know we decided we wanted to be very transparent and put real numbers. Look how much we're getting paid $600 a month, to make sure that everybody knew how much money we were making. But
Page 19.
Thank you. Okay.
Section
I was on
7.1.
I was on 14, talking and passing by.
Compensation and benefits.
Yeah, just if we could say something a little more generic, so it would stand the test of, the next maybe 4 or 5 years before we update it again. So I'm fine with putting in that, this is specifically what we make now, and the period of which the percent increase goes into effect, and when it goes into effect after the election, but not have it so specific that it's going to be out of date. So I don't think we need the 700. You can use that like for an example. The next scheduled increase would be after the election in 2020, and it would go to this, and then rise by, with council approval, this, it could potentially go up to this percent in future years.
We can't automatically state an increase, can we?
Correct.
Yeah, so we can't say it's going to automatically go up a percentage in the future. It has to be an act.
Okay,
I mean,
so
you could-
it could potentially go up?
Well, let me clarify.
Okay. All
So
right.
you could state that in the future it may be raised. In
Okay.
order to raise it, you have to do so by ordinance, and there's a percentage increase that goes up every year, and it can't take effect until after an election.
Write that down.
Yeah.
But I'd
like
also
Gary said.
caveat, the state sets that you may increase a maximum of 5. You could choose $1 or a percentage amount that's lower.
Up to.
Okay.
And that's
So
said in the
that's sort of-
introductory paragraph there.
Yes, yes.
Right, it is stated in that very first paragraph. Let me ask a general question, Michelle. This is something that correctly will be outdated just because by nature it will be outdated. Are there other elements in here that are automatically going to have like a sunset that in 2 years we're going to have to revisit anyway that you can think of?
None that I can think of right now. I mean, the updates will come basically if there's legislation change that's
Yeah.
big enough to impact. Every 4 years, we bring this to you. We could do it on a 2-year cycle if you'd like to do that.
No.
Well, but for example, iPad, tablet standard and stipend.
Yeah,
If
that
we're
could-
calling
that
out a
could
dollar
change.
amount,
Yeah,
we may be in the same situation that
yeah.
either we have to revisit this document anyway and we shouldn't worry about it being outdated, or we should make it more general.
Just a couple thoughts on this, and I don't know that I have a pro or a con.
Right.
The comment was made that it'll be outdated. It actually won't be, because this will reflect your salary unless the council takes subsequent action at a later date.
Good point.
So it tells you what your salary is, because it will be 777. So if the
Unless
council.
changed by ordinance.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to say. So if you may recall, we had a number of years where the council didn't take any action
Yeah,
on
quite a
this.
few years.
So
Yeah, too many
I just want to say, in this particular case, I don't know that it's outdated, because if you don't do that, you know, when we get to the other thing you mentioned is the iPad stipend, and you could put language in there that says the current iPad stipend allowance amount and not specify it.
Because I don't think we're specifying the dollar amount here. This is on page 20.
No, I was just trying to think of what else is in there that has that operates with a dollar value.
It does reference the resolution number. To the extent you ever increased
Yeah,
it, you need to update the resolution number. I mean, I think there are various things throughout this.
Section 7.4
Yeah.
Yes.
on page 20.
Yes, thank you.
So you make a good point, Steve, that it wouldn't be outdated until an official action is taken.
And what we also could do, for example, on 7.4 with the iPad is, or subsequent resolution. So therefore, your protocol document would stay relevant, but it would reference the current resolution
That would be good.
and identify and/or modified by future resolution. So that would be
Yeah.
something.
I mean, those changes in of themselves would require us to review the protocols and make the changes, and it would, right now, our interval is 4 years. So if those types of changes that you're proposing now are substantial enough to warrant having the protocols come back for review, then maybe we should do it in a more frequent basis than 4 years. So those are the things that I just track throughout the years. These types of changes, laws, comments that you've made throughout the year on different processes that you would like refined.
Right, so to that point, Steve, your comment on 7.4 tablets, are you saying don't call out this specific resolution number, 3066-12?
That's one way to address it, and it would just be using the current resolution.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Michelle, does that make sense to you?
It does.
Are we getting 4 head nods about that?
Yes, I'm fine with that. So I'm
And
just
get it-
trying
No,
to.
right above that, travel expense reimbursement references a specific resolution number.
Oh, yeah.
Does that,
Okay.
is that
So-
still appropriate? It might be.
So are you going to ask me down the road where all these things came from and when was the last time we did it, when we review the protocols? Because this is really why I put it in there, so that we have reference to it.
No, I'm just saying if this resolution in 7.3 references a specific, for example, the mileage reimbursement just changed.
It did.
So does that impact, I don't know that it does here.
It
This-
doesn't the
this
way this.
generically
No, it
talks
doesn't.
This
about.
one's generic because this is
Okay.
one that the town maintains. But you're correct, we're in the process of updating and changing our travel reimbursement, which is consistent because our policy says we use the federal reimbursement, right?
So what are we saying here in this section 7, that we are comfortable leaving 7.1 compensation as is, because it would take an ordinance change to change the numbers, so they won't be automatically outdated, and we are changing 7.4, the reference to the resolution number specific, and leaving it a more generic resolution as it,
can I leave in, see resolution adopted November 6, 2012, so it's easy to refer back to rather than.
Sounds very reasonable.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
And am I applying that to 7.3 as well?
Yep, I think if we do those as a footnote or something like that, that would help. And I think it addresses what Michelle's talking about with
Right.
having an ability to have the reference language for some of these things that have external documents.
Yeah, I don't know that you need to, Michelle, in 7.3 because it's not specific.
Okay.
But to be consistent, you could, as long as, I don't want to make it more burdensome for you to find whatever was adopted in September 18th, 2018. If it's easy to do that, then we don't need the specific resolution number.
Okay, I think it'll be easy to do it without the reso. The date alone is council meeting date, and it'll be obvious what that policy is.
Right.
So resolution number with no specific number in 7.3 and in 7.4.
Yes.
Okay. And can we just say, if in your review, there are other sections of this that refer to specific resolution numbers that we're authorizing you to make the consistent change?
Yes, that's
Can we
great.
all agree to that? Okay. So the other, Councilmember Moeller, did you have other things you wanted to call out for discussion? Or,
No.
okay. I have two or maybe three that I'm going to get to at some point, but Councilmember Dornbecker, do you have anything specific you wanted to?
No, I've studying the electronics communication policy all afternoon. So
Yes.
I'm
reply
glad
all.
it's in there. I know that. I never reply all. But, for example, it talked about if, for example, if I got an email from, or if we got an email from a resident in town that went to all of us, that I would not be allowed to even respond to that personally. I would have to refer it back to the town manager to distribute, or I don't understand that piece of it.
Yeah, so perhaps we should pull up the actual section. The way I read it this afternoon was that the mayor would be responding on behalf of the council if there was an inquiry from the public to the
Right.
whole council.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's on page 8.
But I would have to, on page 8, I would have to send my comment to the town manager, to send to the town mayor, and if he didn't approve of what I was going to say, I just am trying to understand that, because from time to time in the past, if I have received something from a resident and they just are asking a question, I have responded. And I haven't copied anyone on it, just,
So
maybe
I'm-
I've copied Steve. Most of the time I copy Steve on whatever I do.
I'm looking
It's
at
section-
2.10.3 subdivision F. Roman
Yeah,
numeral
electronic
1.
communications from the public, on page 8,
And below that is I.
yeah.
So if they, under Roman numeral 2, sub 2, if it's addressed to more than a quorum, it's then forwarded to the clerk, who then distributes it to the mayor for the mayor to respond, if I'm reading this correctly, or the chair of the commission if it's going to the CDIB or the Arts Commission, for example. But it still, I think, references back to Roman numeral 1, where it would be the chair or the mayor that's responding.
So what impact does that have on each individual council member's ability to interact with residents?
So I'd refer to the discussion of the ad hoc committee in drafting this too, and perhaps to the town clerk. But I think this was meant to be an efficient way of communicating and directing the communications.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say maybe the tricky part of this is casual communication is perfectly appropriate for individual council members to engage with residents. It's when representing a topic and like describing, and I'm trying to think of an example on the fly here, but it might be representing the council's position or something like that that shouldn't be represented by someone other than the mayor or the town manager.
I'll give you a hypothetical that I think is fairly easy.
Sorry, I
There we
didn't
go.
quite
So
catch
that's,
that.
the hypothetical I'm thinking about is, you're talking about a potential something. So, an ordinance, and it's out there. Somebody in the public sends you all a comment with their thoughts about the proposed action, and, it's the stupidest thing, where have you? And one of the council member goes, "You're absolutely right." And I think what we're trying to address is, that is a quorum action type of a response. And I think, that's not the individual. There is nothing here about an individual communication. It's really when somebody is doing all 5 of you.
Well, that's what I prefaced my
And that's why I'm
remarks.
saying the individual side's not addressed by this. This is if the communication is sent, because we also know that in many cases, the public feels uncomfortable if somebody does not acknowledge receipt
That's
of
right.
their email. So I think what we're trying to do, if I recall. I don't know why the volume's on this.
Siri's kind of going crazy here.
I think the question was, because you can't use reply all, then you get all of you replying.
No, it has nothing
No,
to
I'm
do
just
with
saying,
reply all.
I'm trying to
No, but there are
recall some of
5
the
responses to
conversation.
the same inquiry potentially.
Right, so trying to figure out how to have a response back so that the person, and by having that.
That's
So that's
exactly
where,
right.
that was the conversation, as I recall, on this particular topic.
Well, I'll give you another recent real example. Power shutoffs. We all get reached out to, what's going on? Well, we might have 5 different versions of what's going on based on our own knowledge. That's where it should be going through a more official channel. It should not be what one of us has read on social media and responded to. It should be what's official, where it's likely going to be the town manager, or it comes from the mayor. But to give different people different information starts to really make
I
it
totally understand
challenging.
that. But I am identifying with what Steve is saying, that I feel compelled to at least acknowledge to that resident who has reached out to me that I have received your email. Can I just do that? Can I thank you for your email?
Yes, absolutely.
I can't say anything more, so
Well, these are the town council protocols. So,
Yeah, and perhaps there's something, you can thank them for their email, but reference this section saying, refer to so-and-so for a response, mayor or town manager, in your response, so that you're acknowledging them. Is that?
This is going to be a little bit of a soft-edged protocol. So what I think may be appropriate is, prior to responding, other than to acknowledge, that's easy enough, nobody's arguing about that. Before responding with some type of statement that could be considered an official position, reach out, you could copy the mayor, you could copy the town manager, and say, I got this, or if it's the mayor, if it's the town manager and the attorney. This resident brought this to my attention, I'd like to respond, or at least have you respond on my behalf. Something like that, rather than us individually responding. And it's going to be kind of a discretionary deal.
well, I have done that in the past when I've received something that, really was for the whole council. I've sent it to Steve and asked him to distribute it to the whole council.
I think we're mixing a couple different things here from what I'm hearing. Sending information when you all want me to share it with the council, that's exactly what Councilmember Dornbecker said. That's very appropriate. I think and I don't disagree with the intent here. The challenge here is the council's had the conversation about what's an official message versus what's an individual council message, and it really is different. If somebody's and here the challenge is when they hit all 5 of you at the same time with one message. And then if you all respond, then that's potentially a Brown Act violation, especially if it's a action item or a potential agenda item. But again, we're going in an area, and I'll refer to what town attorney was saying. This is really your protocols about how you all want the situation to be addressed. So if this isn't quite right, we need to work on it. Although I am going to make one suggestion that if we have a couple areas that still need to be worked on, that we approve the rest, because there's a few things that you all want to use that we really need the official approval. But we want to get this right so that it reflects what you are, because the protocols is also about what are your expectations of each other and how you're all going to work together. So if this is challenging, then we need to work on it some more.
I think we're talking about on page 8 and 9, electronic communications from the public. It's
Right.
section
Right.
2.10.3
I printed
F.
them out myself at
It's-
home.
It's F-I, 2 I's and 3 I's. I believe that's, yeah, it looks like.
Yeah, that's right.
Not right now, no. We'll have public comment after we discuss this. Gary?
Yeah, I would just add to that. Yes, you can respond. I believe this to be the goal for communications to all of you where a unified response makes sense and where staff can assist in that process. But yes, I mean, as an individual elected member, yes, you can respond. I want to make that clear.
Okay, thank you. That clears it up for me, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about that specific
Sorry.
section?
Yes, I thought I had it until you said that. Sorry. So if we get an email addressed to all council members and it says, I see that you have tattoo parlors on the agenda and I don't want a tattoo parlor, or I really got to have a tattoo parlor. Are you saying that we cannot as is this saying that we cannot as individuals respond and say, hey, why don't you tell me why you feel this way about tattoo parlors, or this is my feeling, but I'm waiting to hear everybody else. I mean, or because it also says the mayor or his designee will respond. I mean, there might be some situations where maybe the mayor should not respond because maybe there is not a cohesive official message. Maybe that should be the mayor may respond, and then that would.
I'm going to suggest that we need to continue working on this section.
Yeah,
So
and
we could address the rest of it in case there are other sections that we need more work.
sure. Yeah, I would just add to that very briefly. I don't read this as saying you can't respond. I read this as saying it will be forwarded and there is a process for how it will also be responded to. That answers the question.
So, but if they are asking about something coming up, I shouldn't weigh in on it to them. But I can say thank you for your question. We'll take it under consideration when we have our meeting.
You can certainly say that, and yes.
But I have another question.
Is it about this specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't part of this, whether sometimes we're talking about something quasi-judicial versus legislative. If we're going to talk about banning plastic bags, it's already in the past, so let's pretend like we didn't do it. I have every right to say, I don't care what the council says. I'm in support of this no matter what. When it's quasi-judicial, that's when we really cannot express a solid opinion until we've heard all the evidence. So it depends. But I have every right when it's legislative to say whatever I want as long as I want it. Is that correct?
I agree with that.
Okay. So maybe that needs to be part of this too. And then there's the subjective part about, again, we've got another disaster. We've all agreed it should come from a central person.
Right.
I think we can.
Yeah.
And again, I don't see this policy as written as being inconsistent with that.
Right.
This says that it will be forwarded. It doesn't say it will not be responded to. And so I think something's being read into this that isn't necessarily there.
And maybe the answer, Gary, is we put something in there that nothing prohibits an individual response.
Right. That would work.
That'd be good.
It's called the Constitution.
Yeah.
Right.
I have the freedom of speech.
I'm just saying, because I think the
You know.
intent was, if there's a response, it should be, and the person, but I don't think, and again, it's been a while since some of the ad hoc committee conversations were on this. And it's also kind of, email communication addressed to the public will be distributed to each council member actually doesn't need to be in there, because if it was sent to you all at your email, you already have it.
I'm going to repeat,
I'm
I'd like us to move on.
Yep.
I'd like us to revisit this section after the ad hoc committee can refresh our memory as to what was motivating the language.
Mayor, are you talking just at this point, section F?
Let's just look at the section 2.10. Not quite yet. Hold your questions, write them down if you need to. Because we're going to go through and see if there are other areas that we need to discuss, and then we will invite public comment. I will invite public comment. So anything else in 2.10? We're going to revisit that specifically. Okay. Other things that, who brought this one up? Councilmember Dornbecker, but are there other sections that, Vice Mayor, do you have some that you want to bring up?
Just a couple, and I have discussed with the town clerk and the town attorney, sort of for cleanup and clarification. 2.4, the last sentence begins, certain procedures contained in Rosenberg's Rules of Order are incorporated, and we thought it, and I think they agree with me, that we should probably, it would be clearer just to say Rosenberg's rules are incorporated except to the extent they are modified. So there's no question about whether just certain ones are. They're what we are adopting unless we have modified them in here. The second one is the section we were just talking about, where it says the mayor or his or her designated representative will respond. I think that would probably be better as a may respond, because some things may not need a response. I mean, it may just be, we received your email, but maybe some of them don't need a response. And the final one, which is, hold on, on page 18, section 6, local government advocacy. The first section is council advocacy, and then there is another subhead that says local government advocacy organization outreach, and this is typically, I think, about the League of Cities, national and state, and the Conference of Mayors, et cetera, in which we need to sometimes as individual members make a sort of a quick pivot or a quick response to things, which I totally appreciate. My only question is, the last sentence begins, the various advocacy tools allow officials to communicate positions and concerns consistent with the council's goals. I would like to see us, rather than saying consistent with the council's goals, mirror the language under the first paragraph of council advocacy, which it says, if we have taken action, we should adhere strictly to that. If there is no action that has been taken, which probably likely will be the case in these sort of alerts, then we, in that limited circumstance, we work with town or the mayor to determine whether the position is congruent with established town policies and related actions. I just think those should be the same, because I think then we're kind of, unless, and I do appreciate the whole, are we responding to this outreach as individuals, or are we responding on behalf of the town? And that is the question. If it's on behalf of the town, I think we need to have the same language.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
I see a lot of other councils all over the state do that. My problem has always been timing. Like, for example, I have to make decisions for, on LAFCO, and I'm representing Yountville or some of the Up Valley cities. I might not get some of this stuff until the Thursday before, and we don't really have a mechanism to really communicate that, to kind of get that opinion. So I've always kind of struggled with that. The same way when I serve on the environmental quality, some people there say, oh, well, we had, at our council meeting, we discussed this, and the decision was to support this or not to support that. We just, sometimes I just don't have that luxury with our timing to deal with that. So that's what I struggle with is how do we get everybody's opinion? So I tend to kind of go back generally to our strategic plan, as much as I can, even though we're really talking about a lot of specific topics sometimes. So that's my problem.
And I appreciate that, and that's why I think it works. It says if there's not time or we haven't passed on it, you either talk to the town manager or the mayor to see if it's congruent. So that would be one more phone call, although I do appreciate the timing aspect of it.
At least make an attempt.
Yeah.
Especially with the league, because we are asked to advocate for specific things. And I've come to Steve several times with saying, well, can we write a letter in support of this? And I believe that I have the personal freedom to support something on my own stationery, in my own frame of reference, in my own. Is that true?
That is true.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, I think what we're talking about is if there's going to be a response that is official, it should come through the mayor and the town manager. And I think if we say the language is shall attempt a response, if Steve and/or I are unavailable and there's timeliness, it shouldn't just end there, but there should be an effort in case there needs to be coordination.
That would be.
But sometimes there's specific issues, shall we ban rat poison? Everybody raise your hand in favor or something. I mean, that's something I wouldn't think I would want to come and, call you about ahead of time.
No, I think that
Or-
the mechanism in place is to
Have to
report
take a
out on
position.
report out on the actions that you have taken in that official capacity. So
Right.
we have the discretion that if over time, any one of us is making decisions and reporting out on them, and the council feels like that's misrepresenting the council, then we do what we're about to do in the next item, which is reallocate who's on what committees.
Right. But on the other hand, if we're making something like, on advisory council for the league, it has a lot of other steps. We're just the beginning step in one of our advisory.
A timely example, sorry, Councilor Dornbecker and I are going to be at the countywide climate action subcommittee tomorrow afternoon. We're not meeting again, and there may be some discussion that we need to be able to represent the town.
Right.
And we have the discretion to do that.
Right.
But we should also report out what we have
Agreed.
acted on to make sure we're all in understanding, and if there is a disagreement, then we need to have that conversation however we can legally have that conversation. Either at a future meeting or independently through Steve.
And I think, again, this conversation is one of those where the council is trying to craft an understanding of how your behaviors and expectations are. For example, what I would say, some of what you're talking about really doesn't quite fall into the advocacy. For example, when you're serving on LAFCO, you're actually wearing a LAFCO and you don't have the obligation to come back and see what the guidance is.
We should
Ad
tell
hoc
everybody
commi-
else that on that committee.
Well, I'm just
too.
saying, ad hoc committees generally need to reflect the direction and the actions that the council has taken and be prospective to what they might take and come back and report. So, for example, I would assume in tomorrow's meeting, the mayor and Councilmember Dornbecker will be talking a little bit about the draft discussion of the leaf blower, gas leaf blower ban. But, there's certain things that within that purview that you're allowed to discuss. What we're really talking about here is when we're taking a position.
Well, here's another example. We serve on NVTA. If one of us were to now go and vote against the Yountville bike plan that we all just approved, it would be inappropriate to change that position and not represent the council's voice.
I think that's a good
an easy
example.
one, I think.
It
There are gonna be
is.
some that are more subtle.
But what I would say is you're also, that would be a great one. But I also think more importantly, you're talking about, we want to support X. Okay. In many cases, and Councilmember Dornbecker is correct, you all can individually support anything. Individually with it's the, if you're going and on behalf of the town, that's when we need to know, is that an action or an endorsement that the town council has generally supported, whether it's a 5-0 or a 3-2, that becomes the town policy or position. And then obviously when you adopt certain things, I'll just generally by reference what you have included in the general plan and the climate action plan are policies. So those are policies that the council has adopted. So I think you're really talking about a narrow range, and the ad hoc committee also spent a lot. You know, there are some councils that have a dedicated, and we provided some illustrations to you way back. They spend a lot more time on advocacy. They have working committees. They vet some of this, and then they, you know, have discussions. For example, the County Board of Supervisors actually engages in lobbying and legislation, and they identify a legislative advocacy platform. We've chose not to go there and to try to keep it nimble and basically to have a narrower scope of advocacy, because this is your policy. So when staff is explaining how we've tried to craft what we think we've heard from you, please know this can go a whole lot of ways. What we're trying to reflect is the understanding towards that relationship that you all want to have.
Okay. Anything else on that advocacy section?
I'm done, thank you.
Okay, I've got, I just canceled the one thing, and I'm in section 9 on page 26, agenda. I'm going to ignore my first note, actually page 28. Let's see if I need to, I think my note here, Michelle, 9.3.4 about public comment, just confirming, because this is a change, this officially a change, the 3-minute per speaker, discretion to limit or extend. I'm just kind of calling this out because it is something that we have been operating by, and this is formalizing that. So I'm just calling out that language. I'm not asking to change it.
Limit or extend? Okay.
Yes, when we have a full house and 3 minutes is challenging, I have discretion, and it has to be equal for every speaker, not just you get 3 and somebody else gets 2 and somebody gets 1. And if it's a fairly empty room, there may be some leeway to allow further length of comment. I had 9.5.9, page 37. Okay, page 37, just above 9.5.10. It's technically in 9.5.9, but it's the paragraph starting, although council members can abstain from a vote. The last sentence says, even if a council member abstains from a vote, he or she is encouraged to explain the reason for that abstention. I would suggest that we make that a little bit more explicit and say, shall explain the reason. I just think it's appropriate. Gary, what is your thought on that?
Yes, it could be a little stronger. We chose this language because although there is a strong public policy, ultimately each council member votes their conscience. And if that's a no, it's a no. If it's a not showing up, it's a not showing up. I know you guys don't want to hear this, but ultimately, as independent elected officials, you can choose to abstain and for whatever reason you want.
And do you have to explain that?
No.
I'm suggesting that we should. Whatever the explanation is, it should be explained to the public why what I consider a non-vote, I know it's counted as a quorum and a vote, but I think because we have an obligation to make decisions.
I agree.
And sometimes they're difficult and sometimes it's hard to do it, but that's why I think that if we are going to abstain and not take a yes or no, then it should be explained to the council and the public. It's my opinion.
I agree with that opinion.
Vice Mayor, you're contemplating.
I am contemplating. I'm a no on that. I think that we answer to our constituents. You're exactly right. But I don't think we should force one another to explain every vote that we make. And an abstention, although it's not a vote, an abstention is one of the things we're allowed to do in response to a motion. So I would be a no on that. I would certainly be able, I'm fine with encouraged, strongly encouraged, but I can't go with, we have to do it. Sorry.
Well, that's 2-2. Unfortunately, we have a 5th member not present. Yeah, I just feel like I explain how I feel. We explain our yes and our no votes in our discussion. I think it's made very clear to the public. An abstention after all of that discussion is not clear to the public, or your fellow council members, frankly.
I agree. I mean, I think we usually do a good job of explaining yes or no, but we don't have to. We could just push a red or a green button. And I think we usually do a pretty good job of explaining an abstention. So I would just like to leave us to how we have been operating on that. Sorry.
Well, if none of us are going to change our position, then we're going to, I guess, leave it as it's presented. So you're solid where you are,
Yes.
and you're solid where you are. Okay? So then it'll be encouraged. I'll be sure to encourage it every time,
I'm sure you will.
multiple times.
We could go with strongly encouraged.
Yeah, that-
We all, I
that's
think
so
we
much
could
more-
get 3 votes.
That's so much more binding.
Yeah. John hates those subjective adverbs.
I think those are the only items that I wanted to bring up for consideration. Any others before we ask for public comment? Have we covered all of our post-it notes? Okay, I believe we have a member of the public that would like to comment. Lori, would you like to come forward now?
I had to put it on my phone so I'd remember what to say. Hi, I'm Lori Hinnick, and I live at 1899 Unit 21, Fennell Road. And I am responding because I just sent emails to everybody. And Steve had brought some questions to mind. So one, are emails to the town council considered confidential, or once received, can they be shared with other town staff?
They're not confidential, they're a public document.
Okay,
Yeah, as soon as we receive anything from the public, it's public record.
okay, so that's a good
Phone
question.
call, potentially, I mean, there's no way really to track a phone call, but a voicemail would be equally public record if somebody were to ask for it.
Okay, and are town council members allowed to voice their stance on any subject that may be on the agenda? Like if I email and say, well, what do you think about this?
It depends.
We are not, it's inappropriate for us to have a final decision before we have a public discussion on an item. That's the
Okay.
short answer. We could have opinions, but they should not be,
But they can't say
Decisions.
yes or no, okay.
Here's what I would say to that. The expectation that the public has is that the council is going to make a decision based on the material and the information presented. So that's going to include the staff report, the packet, the public comment, and the presentation. So if somebody was to respond to you before the council meeting, then they've not benefited themselves of whatever the public comment, input, applicant testimony, or questions of other council members. So in general, people may have a position, but it's certainly not something, and in a quasi-judicial area, it actually is illegal and will jeopardize the council's actions if they are to preordain a decision.
Okay,
and yes, that is inconsistent at other levels of government.
okay. And, give me a second here. Let's see. Is there a requirement to acknowledge that a communication has been received? Because I got one answer from Jeff Durham that just said, thank you for your email, and I went, oh, that's good, at least I know that one went through. Is it a requirement for you guys to at least let somebody know that, and confirm that, that a communication has been received?
There's not an
Or is it
obligation.
okay, no obligation?
That's a discretionary issue for each individual
Okay.
that may choose to respond, may not choose to respond, but I think you could,
Optional.
you can, it's optional, yes, but you could probably assume that if, I shouldn't say this, as you say, if one responds, that means all the addresses received it, but that's not true if you
Okay.
potentially had a wrong address, so, but it is discretionary,
Okay.
optional.
But that is exactly why sometimes I'm reticent to do it, because it's, because of this discussion.
Because of the legality or whatever?
Yeah, so it's good that we're having this discussion, and I realize that I can have a personal opinion, but I will always say, and I do try to come here without having made a decision, listen to everything
Okay.
that I hear.
Okay, in the last,
So Lloyd, just to explain that a little further,
Okay.
if you are reaching out to a council member, you need to be aware that if you send me an email about a topic that we're going to hear at a meeting, I forward that to the town clerk and the town manager and ask for it to be put in the public record.
Okay,
Even if you want that
that's
to be
fine.
confidential to me, that's my obligation, because the rest of the
Okay.
public needs to know you're providing information that I'm considering, or any one of us is considering,
Okay.
and it's part of the transparency that we're obligated to.
that's news to me, but that's fine. I just didn't know how that worked. Okay, the last one is, keep shutting me out, hold on. The last question is, does the public have access to the town budget, and is it possible to get a printout? If someone has an interest on how the money is being used, also information about the multiple sources of income.
It is absolutely available. It's printed as well as online. It's available.
Oh, it is online.
It's always online.
I didn't know that.
It's on the town website.
There's a boatload of information at www.townofyountville.com.
I didn't realize that.
Yes,
Okay.
and you're invited to send town staff or council, any questions you would send to a council member, likely, I assume, we would forward them on to staff, and you would probably get a response from staff who'd have the answers for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? I see one. Oh. I see a quasi-member of the public.
I just want to add to that budget question that there is a public copy here, so we don't have printed copies that you can take, but there's a public copy you can view here, and I think there's also one at the library. That's all.
And it's because it's so long that we don't make a whole bunch of copies in paper. Okay, so that's the public discussion. Michelle, do you need any more guidance from us?
One clarification on Vice Mayor Dorman's comment for section 2.4, the Rossenberg Rules of Order.
That's page 5.
Yes, please. Is there concurrence to delete the one sentence, certain procedures relating to?
I was comfortable with the recommended change in language, as long as Gary is.
Yes.
Everyone else?
Okay, that's it then, thank you.
So the only section we feel like we might need to really revisit as an ad hoc committee is that
2.10,
2.10.
hold for,
The e-communication.
yes.
It's
Said
a,
to
it's a
hold the
new
whole
section.
It is a new section.
So I'm not surprised that we have some,
Good point. We have some
juggling
Fleshing out to do.
Fleshing out to do, thank you.
Okay, is that
So-
all the action you need, or we need to actually approve this as,
Some type of action would be appropriate.
approve this potentially as presented, except that one section?
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
I move that we adopt resolution number 20-3966, amending and updating the town council protocols with the exception of section 2.10, which will go for further discussion at the ad hoc and come back to council.
I'll second that.
And just to double check, we decided we're clear on the local government advocacy section, I think, at least for now,
I think so.
correct? Okay,
Status quo.
Well, you had that one change about making the two consistent.
yes.
Yes.
So as amended, do we need an as amended because of those resolution references?
Yes.
Yes.
Sounds good.
And adding as amended, section 6.
And that works? for-
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Did you verbalize? Oh, that's unanimous.
Abstain.
Why? Okay,
I couldn't resist that.
yeah, there you go. Next, item 9F, annual review of town council appointments, et cetera.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Basically, this is our annual review of council serving on various regional boards and commissions and ad hoc committees, and there are bulleted items in the staff report that need specific direction from council. One of the items is consider transitioning the OPEB ad hoc subcommittee to a standing committee or disbanding. And this committee typically only meets once or twice per year, but no longer meets the definition of ad hoc. Bullet 2, consider transitioning the Emergency Preparedness Ad Hoc Committee to a standing committee, as this ad hoc committee has expressed an interest in ongoing education and community outreach. Consider renaming the Resident Engagement Standing Committee to the Small Projects Happiness Standing Committee. And council may also want to discuss continuation of the standing committee and membership composition. Consider disbanding the Town Council Protocols Ad Hoc Subcommittee, which we won't since
Can't
we
do that
are making one more edit, and review the council's current countywide assignments and make appointments as appropriate, and then establish any other ad hoc committees that you think may be necessary. Those are the main action items, and then at the council's pleasure, we can go through the roster provided and see if there are any changes requested.
So I think I'm going to suggest, but we'll ask for questions. The first 3 items, we may be able to address those 3 bullet points.
Okay.
We're not going to disband the protocols, which we will just skip over that. So are there questions or, are there questions about those first 3 committees? Any opposition to these plans?
I have a
Councilmember Mueller?
general question. Okay, if we convert to standing committees, Mr. Attorney, what does that do? Does that make it now everything is a public? And can we perhaps take an ad hoc? I'm not trying to play any games at all, but, you know, we have this name, and over time, it actually, what we're doing changes. And would it, you know, could we actually change the name of an ad hoc that was formed a few years ago to actually now more reflect what we're really doing now and still remain ad hoc? Those are 2
Yes,
questions.
yes, and I think the way to do that would be to disband the old one and create a new one. So one of the things that distinguishes an ad hoc from a standing is the length of time it exists and the scope of its jurisdiction. So if it's for a relatively shorter period of time, 1 or 2 subjects, it's more likely to be characterized as an ad hoc. The longer it exists, the more likely it is to be considered a standing committee. So if its jurisdiction has changed and you want to keep it as an ad hoc committee, I think the approach would be to disband, create a new one, or simply appoint to a new committee that's named something different with a new scope of jurisdiction.
And a standing committee is noticed to the public.
Correct.
And agendized.
Correct.
Subject to the Brown Act.
And it follows the same agenda rules in terms of 48 hours or 72 or whatever we have.
I'm not sure.
And it has to get posted at the library and stuff like that.
Are all the postings and times the same?
Yeah, if
Yes.
you don't have a set, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you have a set time, then the posting applies for the 72 hours or 20 for regular meeting and 24 hours for special, but typically ad hoc committees, I don't think you have the same standing time, so it would generally be the 24-hour posting because it's considered a special meeting.
Yeah, that's right. So when you create the ad hoc committee or the standing committee, you could say this committee will meet every Thursday at this time, or the 3rd Thursday of every month at this time, in which case that would be the regular meeting of that committee, and then that would be a 72-hour notice. Otherwise, you can meet when you'd like to, and that would be a 24-hour notice for a special meeting.
Like the Cannabis Standing Committee that
Correct.
meets this Friday.
Yes.
So I have a couple of questions about that, about the Emergency Preparedness Committee, because we don't have any other committee members except Carrie Dorman and myself, really. We do go and meet with people from the neighborhoods or when we do a workshop, but it's not on an ongoing, it's sort of a sporadic basis. I don't quite get how we could be a standing committee.
Because your duration now has gone on longer than you're in multiple fiscal years.
And you were also created by action of the town council.
And
That's the
your-
big distinction.
So what I would say to that is the individual outreach that you're doing is appropriate, but, especially since you've indicated as the Emergency Preparedness Committee that you want to continue planning for a workshop, planning to implement and execute and upgrade our outreach on helping neighbor. What's happening there is it's not going back to the definitions, the town attorney said, it's not short-term duration, it's now turned into a longer term. And I think those are the key elements.
Let me jump in. You can meet once a year as a standing committee.
Yes.
Correct.
You don't have to meet monthly, quarterly. You pick when you want to meet, basically.
And you don't have to
right.
have a minimum number of members?
No, but you would have to agendize it, and you'd hold it in a public space like here.
And
Or
notice
a
it.
noticed space.
Yeah, that's a great example of where we're at with the OPEB, is initially it started out with the feedback of directing, we wanted to look at and understand what the performance measures. Now it's turned into an annual review and meeting, but it happens once, possibly a second meeting.
And now it's a standing committee.
Well, we're
Well,
going to decide
that's
that.
why we're
We're
saying it
deciding
now
that right
needs
now.
to become a standing committee, because we've reached that threshold. And I think part of this is just us spending a little bit more time looking at our committees and going, okay, we're kind of, we need to tighten up a few of these things, because,
Especially when people don't remember if they're on a committee or not. That means they haven't met for a while.
well, there's
right?
that, but even just, like you were saying, the OPEB committee is now meet with enough frequency that it needs to be a standing, same with the emergency preparedness.
Okay.
And I'm just saying, it's the duration here that is the issue, not the topic.
Or the size of the committee.
Correct. The size of the committee won't stand, because
Doesn't matter.
none of our committees can exceed 2, or it becomes a
But in terms
quorum
of other,
violation.
permanent
Yeah.
resident members or
Permanent resident
staff.
members.
Right.
Yeah,
You could invite people, for example, I'll just,
we got it, I think.
Yeah, we understand. Thank you.
So let's take any of these 3 committees we're talking about. If council were to make a decision, we no longer wish to have that, something named OPEB ad hoc, and were to disband it, could then the members of that committee who remain interested in OPEB still continue to work on that? I mean, it's the difference between what council I'm trying to figure out what council wants and what
And I-
individual members want. Where
Sure.
does that coincide?
Yes, I'm happy to jump in on that.
Thank
So
you.
yes, 2 council members can always meet with staff on their own time and talk about things that are within the council's purview. It's less than a quorum, and that's not a meeting of the council, so there's not a Brown Act issue. Your question on it, if it can be disbanded, yes, that would have an effect, because one of the requirements of it being a standing committee is that it be created by formal action of the town council. So by taking a vote and creating an ad hoc committee that is in duration, it's that formal action that is a prerequisite for it becoming a standing committee.
But I'm hearing you ask, it's a ad hoc committee now. If it's disbanded, can the 2 ad hoc committee members still pay attention to OPEB issues
And the answer is
Yes.
yes.
The
without
answer-
ever becoming a standing
Right.
committee?
The answer
Isn't
is
the real
yes.
question for the council, what do we want a committee to do?
Right, but I also will point out, to the vice mayor's point, in many cases, the council has provided some limited direction that allows a committee to make certain decisions and recommendations. For example, with OPEB, they were given some direction to make funding options. They didn't have to come back to the council, they reported. The emergency preparedness, you don't bring back your agenda, you don't bring back the work plan for the events and activities that you were empowered under the scope. So I'm just saying, that's what you, and then you
But
lose.
we will have to do that going forward.
No, you would still, it's just, under a standing committee, it's actually going to create a little more work for staff, because we have to notice your meetings and that's really the only difference. It's still the 2 of you on whatever committee you're working on, same with the cannabis, you're now open to the public. Now, in many cases, you've invited people to some of these meetings to provide information or obtain information and comment, but it just changes the nature a little bit. It's still official. If you disband it and 2 people come talk to the city manager, that's all they're doing, is they're coming and talking to the town manager. They can't come at a later point and say, our recommendation as the X to the council is to do this. So it's a nuance, but it's.
Do the 2 members of the OPEB committee feel like they need to remain as to exist?
I've been on it. I like money. I'm good at numbers, and my interest in staying on it is because there's this threshold of $5 million. We're not that far away from it. Right now, we are obligated under the financial advisors that we have to let them manage the money. Once it hits that $5 million mark, I know town's going to go, oh, no, I don't want to do that. We can start directing how some of those funds go. And I like oversight of other people's money. I think it's very important. I
My
think it's
question wasn't about whether you continue to have oversight, it's do you need to do it in the form of a committee, is my question.
Oh, well, you know, if we can meet when staff meets with our financial advisors and not be a committee, I'm fine with doing that.
We'll just be a standing, it can also, sorry, it can also
So
just be a,
the challenge though, Steve, well, you're now talking about making financial decisions.
if they're not a committee, then they don't have the ability, they don't have any delegated authority from the council.
There's an
That's the
obligation
issue.
to inform the council of action.
Correct.
Right.
And they wouldn't have the ability, they'd just be saying, all right, that's nice. You know, but in this case, you know, they look at it, they look at some different options, and they've said, we want to take this approach.
Who's the other member?
Jeff?
If you feel like, for now at least, we should keep it as a committee,
It is,
then let's
and
just
it meets-
say, let's keep it as a
It's
committee. It has to
typically
become
meeting once a
standing
year.
committee.
Yep, standing, but it's just saying, we're recognizing again that it's reached that point. That's all we're saying.
Okay, so one more clarification, so we'll have to agree that this is going to continue this way. So it's a standing committee. Can we go out to lunch and have our meeting? It's not a public place, because it's now going to be a public.
A second part to that, but yes.
You have to
You'll do the meeting.
notice wherever you're going to have the conversation.
Precisely.
You would literally have to put a sign on the door of the restaurant.
You have to have the location on the agenda itself, and you need to physically post it and eat your lunch somewhere where people could be.
Any
It
meeting,
has to be open to the public.
yeah, right. Any meeting you have is open to the public and would have to be agendized.
So, and we'd just be playing games if we said this is going to be OPEB meeting of 2020, and that's the name of the ad hoc, and then form another one next year, OPEB meeting 2021. That's just
Your subject
nonsense.
matter is the same, so you're
Right.
not, that's,
Because I am sensitive to the staff doing that, and then the public hearing about it, and it's just like, it does get very
But
restrictive,
It
but
depends on
those
how
are the
frequently you're
rules.
meeting. If you're meeting
Once a year.
Yeah, once a year, it's not onerous. So can we commit to making OPEB a standing committee, emergency preparedness a standing committee, and changing the name of the other one to small projects, standing committee? Can we do that?
Okay.
Yes, verbal? Yes.
Do we need a formal?
I know, I'm fine with that, I just
I'm
want
getting
it
at
out
least
loud.
3 nods. Are you?
No,
okay
yeah,
with that?
I'm,
Right.
okay, so, just another question. So, for emergency preparedness, that standing committee has to meet in a public place and it has to get noticed. You can't show up at Councilmember Dorman's house and have a meeting anymore. Okay.
You could,
Unless
you,
I'm willing to make that a public place.
you could meet at a home, you could meet at a clubhouse, as long as it's noticed and signed accordingly.
And I allow the public in to my home.
But she doesn't have to put a notice on her door.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry.
That's okay. All right.
If,
So
if
we're
a-
having all our meetings at your place, Gary.
if an elected official is traveling, they could, in
Yep.
theory,
Yep.
post it on a hotel room door and
Right.
be on a speakerphone.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
All right, those 3 top bullets, the next one, we're not disbanding. Let's see, before, do we know of any additional ad hoc committees that are necessary? I don't know that we,
the only one that you've just conceptually is your Yountville Elementary sculpture, but
Oh, yeah.
premature.
Good point.
Okay, let's go to the roster of appointments, because
Okay.
everything else is settled, right, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I would really feel better if we did this when Jeff is here, because I think we should ask Jeff if he wants to be the alternate on the Watershed Information and Conservation Council. I don't,
Sorry.
I don't know.
Right.
Well,
I'm going to make just one title correction,
Okay.
if I could, on page 4, the bottom. Here it's listed as the County Climate Change Collaboration Ad Hoc. That's not the name.
Where are you at?
The
page
very
four?
bottom on
Oh,
page 4.
Yes, I see it. What is it called?
It is the county, wait a minute, I gotta get
You
out
have
of it.
it above as a county 2x2.
It's the Countywide Climate Action Committee.
Countywide
That's-
Climate Action Committee.
Countywide Climate Action Committee, that's what's on the agenda.
Okay, countywide climate action. Okay,
Committee.
thank you.
So not to belabor, why isn't this a standing committee?
It's just begun. It's really, this is only our second meeting, third.
If this goes, do we know what the
Yeah.
duration typically is, Gary?
There's not a bright line rule, unfortunately.
And a gray line would be 6 months, 1 year?
Yeah, I would seem to think about a year is probably a good
So
rule of
we
thumb.
may have to revisit that.
Right, I'm just saying it's,
But it's already a public meeting and it's agendized, so it's
That's
being
true.
treated by the county under all the
Actually,
conditions
yeah,
of
we
a,
voted for officers, we agendized it, it's also, announced.
Aren't you all our representatives to a countywide committee? You're not an actual ad hoc of this body.
right, but I think the
correct?
question
So
was
would
why
that be
isn't it an
different?
ad hoc committee that's representing at the county committee? It's because we're county committee members appointed by the council. And the countywide cannabis,
You're going back.
that
Yeah,
group
so-
disbanded.
yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think that exists anymore.
Okay, so I can just.
Sorry,
sign
that's page
that.
3 of 5.
Okay, thank you. It's highlighted.
And I'll just jump in, this doesn't, well, it might affect,
Can I go back to the council ad hoc? If this is a county, does it need to be moved up to the county reference and out of that, or? you
the
wanna
climate
leave-
action,
Yeah, or just leave it?
you probably are right.
Yeah, I think it has to go countywide.
It basically replaces the countywide cannabis.
Okay.
Yeah, good catch. Because the staff representation is county staff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And we do not have a regular meeting schedule, at least not yet.
Not yet.
And that's Councilmember Dornbecker and myself.
Yes. And Jeff is the alternate, right, of the climate action?
I guess he is.
Okay.
The only other thing I wanted to bring up is ABAG. Since I am not required to be on that, I feel like I need to step off of that
Okay.
board. I just know that my travel schedule is going to require, I have missed several of those meetings already and probably will continue to do so. So I know the vice mayor is already on here. If you'd be open to being that delegate and then we find an alternate or if somebody else wanted to be a delegate.
I would be happy to fill the delegate position.
Well, I could be the alternate on that one.
That's easy.
I'm
Is that
not
okay?
fighting, nope, didn't hear peep out of me.
I think what we might be able to do, this is a situation where if Councilmember Durham hears of these changes and has a different opinion, then we might reconsider, but this is timely because there's a meeting on the 4th of February that I'm already missing. The vice mayor is going to fill in.
So what about the Sphere of Influence Ad Hoc Committee? Sure sounds like since we've been meeting since 2016, that we should probably be a standing committee based on the 6-month one rule.
But we haven't met in over a year.
See, that's where it gets fuzzy, Mr. Attorney. What do we do?
Well, it does. There isn't a bright line rule. So, and the longer the committee's been around, the more frequently it meets. That really the duration of the committee is when it turns into a standing committee. So even if you're not meeting for 2 years, if it's been around for that long, it's more likely to be a standing committee.
The likelihood is we will re-engage that committee, correct?
This is one, I think this is one where we actually may be able, the focus changes. It's less sphere of influence, which is how it started when we were doing it. And really, it is.
Tax code.
It's the potential annexation. So that would be, I'm just saying, but it's more of a meeting with the county with regard to that particular, so there the scope has changed because it did start with the crafting and development of the issues related to the sphere of influence change, which the council's adopted and included in the general plan. So, but the current conversation is, do you want to proceed with implementation of annexation?
Well, so
Or other-
is the only action related to Domaine Shandong?
Yes.
So should it be the Domaine Shandong land use or zoning
That would be appropriate.
ad hoc committee? And start the clock on that
Yes,
ad hoc
because
committee?
because as we've discussed, there could be alternatives short of annexation. So I think Domaine Shandong land use would be an appropriate change.
And it would be, so we would disband sphere of influence ad hoc committee and start a new ad hoc committee with a new clock, and potentially the same
I
membership.
just want to, Sandra, are you comfortable? Because really the sphere of influence, I just want to confirm, the sphere of influence is done.
Yes?
Yep.
Yeah. Is council okay with that?
Yes.
We have all yeses.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Spans, sphere of influence. And establish.
Yeah, that's
Change to domain.
The domain.
Domaine Shandong land use ad hoc committee.
Got it. Thank you.
What we're really trying to do is negotiate we have to negotiate a tax sharing agreement before we can move to the annexation. So, but we can call it that. It's just
But that's not a guaranteed outcome, so,
well, we can't do anything with the land until we have that. But anyway.
we'll meet about it.
Okay, well, okay, let's talk about it some more.
Well, we have one that has not met that you've identified potentially as the Wi-Fi hotspot, and we anticipate that we actually may be ready to activate that committee within 60 days.
Okay, parking ad hoc, sounds like we're standing.
Hopefully not.
No? Okay, all right, we're gonna go with the 1 year rule on that one?
A little more time on the calendar on that one.
Gary said 1 year, okay.
So that,
Then it may. We may not make it.
All right. Maybe we can change it to parking lot ad hoc. All right,
Did I miss something?
no.
Sorry.
Parking ad hoc committee, you were just,
You did miss something.
so.
Okay,
the
well, we're
question-
getting close.
We have time.
We're over the 6-month rule, but we haven't met the 1 year.
Got it.
So we're going with
Ad
ad
hoc.
hoc.
It may be a change this time next year if it still has ongoing discussion.
All right.
I think you've covered them all, the roster, unless there's changes to current assignments.
Remind me after.
Okay.
Now I think we're all
Anybody have any other?
busy enough.
The Napa County Youth Opportunities Commission still exists?
Still exists, but we have not met in a long time.
Okay. Any other action needed, Michelle?
I'd like you to, for purposes of notifying the county and the other regional bodies, I like an action, so I can send them a minute order proof. Some of the staff there ask for that.
Okay.
So, action approving changes made as listed in the staff report and notated within the roster.
Any public left to comment? No. Okay, is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Is that clear enough, Michelle?
Yes.
Since you made the motion for us.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, excuse me, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
you can't get off the committee.
No, I don't. I just wanted to let you know that the Watershed Information and Conservation Committee meetings start at 3 p.m. instead
did
of
they
4.
change?
They
Oh, good.
changed.
Thank you for that.
So I wanted to let you know that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Joe, a brief
you
staff informational report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, we have your semi-annual update of the FY 19-20 CIP. We will be brief, cut it down to about 45 slides.
I looked already, it's 32 or something like that.
So just a little bit of a quick update for you. This budget was about roughly 3.7 million, 31 projects, 23 of which are complete or underway. That's about 74% of the projects on the list. They include the Capital Projects Fund, gas tax funds, Measure T, and the enterprise funds. First up on the list for us tonight, the Community Hall, Center Hall parking lot resurface. Contracts have been let on that. We are waiting for the weather to clear and warm up so that they can apply the surface, and then we need a little bit of a window for the events that happen at the Community Hall and Community Center to kind of line up, but that should be underway shortly. That is a $15,000 project.
How long will that take to accomplish?
A couple of days, because we split the parking lot up into a couple of
Okay.
different pieces so traffic can get in and out.
Okay.
It's usually a couple of days. It might be, depending on how Samantha and her team need it split up, it might be 3, so that we can manage her event traffic and get keep the business of the Community Hall and Community Center going while we do the resurfacing. Fennell Path Maintenance and Repair. This was a $150,000 project. As you all are aware, it went out to bid early in the fiscal year last summer. We rejected the bids. It was more than double the budgeted price of $150,000. We're going back out to bid on this project shortly. We're going to expand the schedule a bit to hopefully, we heard back from some contractors, and if they had a little bit more time to do the project around their own schedule, it would work better for them. So we're hopeful that that will happen. It's going out to bid. It should be back before you all for award or rejection, hopefully award, late February, early March. New pedestrian path from Oak Circle to Mission. This has been a long-lived project. Got pushed off, as you all recall, 14-15 due to lack of funding. Came back to us as we knew it would because funds were available. This is a $500,000 grant-funded project for construction. We are in design phase right now. That design is been approved, actually, and what we're trying to do now is manage the appraisal with West America property owners. That process is an arm's length distance process for us. We are out of that because of the nature of the federal grant that's attached to it. We're not allowed to participate in that. Once they have negotiated or have an appraisal number, then we will be able to contact the owner and hopefully get that deed in hand. And then once we have the deed in hand, we can go back to the state with our project and request funds. At that point, we will be a fully funded project, and we will go out to bid and hopefully get under construction sometime this summer. I think the anticipated length of that project is somewhere around 30 days, and I think it's also important to note of that $500,000, about half of the path is going to be paid for by ad hoc for the development agreement we had for addendum. So not all of that $500,000 is going to come out of the grant. About half of it will come out of the ad hoc portion. And as soon as we get the deed in hand, we're going to hopefully get under construction. Yountville Bike Path resurface. This is a $35,000 project. We have torn out a portion of the bike path on the Yountville mile and replaced it with concrete where the roots were causing problems on the path. We are again waiting for weather to clear so that we can slurry seal and stripe it if needed or as needed. Again, I think it's important to note that the Vine Trail pays for half of this by agreement. So half of that $35,000 we will bill out to the Vine Trail group, and they will help us keep this path in shape. And that is outside of the other money that they pay us to maintain the path on an annual basis. The next project up is the Joint Treatment Plant Modernization Project. So we're in design this year, $100,000 budgeted. It's pretty close to finished design. It includes a men and ladies restroom and shower, some crew spaces, a small break room / plan meeting room, a supervisor's office, and enough space for the staff to have a little bit more room than they have now. They're all crowded into that one older building built in 1977. We are working with PG&E. We have to relocate a transformer and some service, but that shouldn't delay this project. So that's expected to go into construction in 2021. Video and repair of the outfall line at the joint treatment plant. It's $100,000 budgeted. It's going to be much less than that. The numbers that I am getting back now are somewhere in the $35,000 to $50,000 range for this project, which is good given the condition of some of our enterprise funds. So we're gonna videotape this project. The pipeline is approximately 3/8 of a mile. Look and do an assessment of the condition, and then come back in a couple of years with a project to repair what's needed. Epoxy the scum well. That project is complete. It was budgeted at $30,000. It came in at $15,000, right at $15,000. It is finished. This is a project that it's kind of an ongoing maintenance issue. Once every 6 or 7 years, it's required. The chemicals in the wastewater are just a difficult product on concrete in general. And so this is just one of those kinds of things that's kind of an ongoing scheduled project in the course of a wastewater treatment plant.
Joe, when we have a savings like that, 15,000, or potentially the other one you said might be well under 100,000, what happens to the leftover funds?
That goes back to fund balance. So in the case of both of those will go back to the fund balance of the joint treatment plant, the wastewater recycling facility.
So whichever fund it's in, it stays there.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
So I have a quick question about that. You just kind of mentioned this is kind of a recurring thing. Isn't this something that maybe shouldn't come out of the CIP and actually be part of the rates?
By law, anything over $10,000 is required to be kind of in that kind of a program. I guess we could put it into a maintenance. It's not regular enough that we could plan it on that kind of a schedule. So it's kind of on an as-needed basis. We're hoping that the product that they use this time lasts a bit longer, and it's not every 5 or 6 years. It's every 8 or 10 years. So.
Okay.
Councilmember Moeller, to your point, though, utility enterprise capital projects are included in our rate projections?
So the ratepayers actually do pay for this? Oh,
That's correct. And remember, anything that's done at the treatment plant is also shared 50% with the Veterans Home.
Right.
Here, what I would say, we're giving you the capital projects update, which includes principally those funded by the general fund, but also includes enterprise
So
fund
the
capital
WW
projects.
should have been my signal.
Yep.
That's correct. Replacement pump station pump. So this went in at our collection system pump station, the former treatment plant in the old days. Again, we have 3 pumps, 2 of which are in service full-time, and this acts as a backup or replacement if it's needed. And that is in place, was budgeted at $39,000. It came in right at $39,000. The regulator pit relocation project. This project is now complete. They actually placed the cage on it today, so it's 100% complete. It came out very well. As you all know, the former location was problematic for a number of reasons. It was out in the middle of the travel lane. It was a tight space. We didn't have a lot of access. This solution was perfect for solving all of those problems. So it has been operating seamlessly, and now we have the cage in place, so it's 100% complete. Came in on budget at about $190,000.
Wasn't that taken out by a truck?
No, that was the Rector Reservoir blow off that was taken out by a truck. So that was
that same
That was
location?
a Vets Home piece of infrastructure, not a town piece of infrastructure. Ours was, we were impacted only because we had infrastructure in the vicinity.
But that's the same location.
Same location.
So
It was closer, it was basically right on the edge of road. Ours is well off the edge of road if you go back and look at it. We're off the edge of road several feet, and we have those bollards in place, so.
So is the damaged equipment underneath those poles? in the concrete?
They actually put the equipment now underground. They put it into a valve box, and they now have a valve that's in the ground, and they open up the valve box and use the blow off. They hook a hose or another piece of pipe onto it, get it up out of the ground.
But those two are independent?
They're independent, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, one was owned by the Vets Home, and this one is owned and operated by the town.
You said we came in on budget at 190. The matrix you sent us says 150. Was that the extra for the cage that we needed? The special fabrication on the cage?
There was some extra money on the cage. There was some additional valve work, and then just some unknowns when we were digging out that we kind of had to deal with as we came across the road. So all those things added up to just a little bit more, and that's what the extra costs were.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So this is a list of the programs that we have ongoing. So programs are a little bit different than projects in that they are ongoing annual planned evolution. The ADA Accessibility Improvements Program budgeted for $100,000. We have been replacing handicap ramps in lots of neighborhoods. As some of you may have noticed, we've also continued to work on our self-evaluation and transition program. We're in year 5 on that, so we continue to try to whittle away at that. The GIS mapping improvements, $50,000 budgeted for this year. The big thing this year is we have a work order program now fully functional, and we have used some of this money to help make that more functional and help give us some of the funds that we needed to create that asset management program. So I think at last count, we had a couple of hundred work orders that we had completed already, and it's really only been really live for about a month and a half or so. So the crew has really embraced it. It's fully functional with GIS, and it works seamlessly with our Esri GIS platform. The townwide drainage and improvements, $16,500. We've been working on and off over the past couple years on the drainage at Padroni behind Jessup. We kind of fondly call that little area there Lake Jessup after it rains and the water that comes off of the Jessup property. This year we put a new Cross Valley gutter right at the driveway entrance to Jessup, and it seems to have, if not completely eliminated it, reduce it to the point where it's no longer a nuisance problem in the neighborhood. So for a little bit of money, and that money is kind of what we do with those funds, is we use it in-house to help us solve nuisance flooding issues around town. So it's a handy little program for us, and it definitely helps the people who are being inconvenienced or worse by the nuisance flooding that has been problems in some areas. Annual street maintenance and paving program, so MT is a Measure T, that's budgeted at $550,000. This year we already did a microservicing program in town. That was around $150,000, and we have Oak Circle out to bid, and we would expect in the next, I think late February, we'll be back with a recommendation for award. That should go under construction sometime in early April. In the past, we have done what we call a reconstruct, where they grind up the paving. The research and the analysis that they did on the pavement in Oak Circle didn't require that extensive amount of work, so we were able to include additional streets. So this year we also included Heather in between Mulberry and Oak Circle, and it will also include Oak Circle all the way from Washington. So we were getting a little bit more street than we had planned, but we're trying to kind of get that neighborhood done while we're there, and it's going to be a 20 to 25 year product when it's finished. The annual street maintenance and paving program, gas tax money, we use that money to basically project manage the with consultants the Measure T money. Surveys and monuments, we're always working on trying to establish right-of-way. Our recent work on the north end of town is a great example of that. And there are several other examples where that $15,000 goes to great use to help us, number one, reestablish the survey monuments that have been lost for a variety of reasons, and or reestablish the public right-of-way. Streetlight replacement, this is the last year of this program, $40,000. We now have in hand, or will shortly have in hand, all the streetlights we need to completely restore the town-owned lights to the new town standard. And that includes a couple of park lights in addition to the normal street lights that we bought. Curb, gutter, and sidewalk replacement, SB means it's an SB1 project, $40,000. We are also continuing to do a fair amount of curb, gutter, and sidewalk work in advance of our paving work. Utilities programs, inflow and infiltration, and sewer main replacement and repair. Both those programs are mandated by our permit. And when we got the last 5-year permit, which we are now back in negotiation for the next 5-year, they said that they would let that amount be sufficient, and they would review and recommend additional funds if needed based on what the data that we're able to provide. And so we think that we are making headway on our inflow and infiltration, and that they're not gonna task us with a big number. This number will probably stay pretty consistent with what the permit's gonna require. Plant equipment replacement program, this just it goes to fund balance. If we have something that fails that we haven't planned for, this is the pot of money that we can use, and if we don't use it, it just goes back to fund balance. Town pump station equipment replacement program, that's the same type of fund for the pump station. The water meter replacement program, again, the same type of funding mechanism. We are constantly replacing meters. This just helps us build fund balance to replace those meters. And the main service lateral replacement program is the same type of vehicle. So all of those are annual programs. Should we not use all of these funds, they all go back to fund balance. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
No?
Any public? No. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
A lot of work ahead and behind.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I do have one question.
No.
Oh.
Yes.
So Joe, I noticed that there are trees in containers behind the pickleball courts. When are those trees going to go into the ground?
As soon as we can get dry enough ground to go out and plant them.
Dry enough?
Dry enough.
Dry
As soon as it dries up enough so we can get a piece of equipment out there to dig a hole
I
and
see.
put them in
Okay.
the ground.
That's all. Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to council meeting reports. Napa County Flood Control will be meeting next on February 4th, and the Vice Mayor will be attending that. I will be traveling to Washington, D.C. Napa Valley Transportation Authority, the meeting is Wednesday, January 15th. 15th. Do we have an Upper Valley Waste Management Authority report?
In December, when we had a lot of rains, there was some leachate that was discovered coming out of the landfill. I don't see any surprised looks over here. The Regional Water Quality Control Board was out at the same time with the company, and fortunately, they determined that there was no creek contamination or anything like that, and they said, it's kind of what's expected. So what we thought was very concerning, it wasn't concerning to the water board, so we were very happy to hear that. We are actively meeting with the company. The current plan is to try to consolidate and update both our UVDS and our Clover Flat contracts, and UVDS has hired our very own Gary Bell to help with that work, and we are proceeding together with the company. Our ad hoc met today, and we'll be meeting with the company on Friday to continue negotiations.
Thank you. Watershed Information and Conservation Council.
I'm sorry, I had the report to give you the last time we met, and we went so late, and I thought I had my notes in this book, and I don't. So I'll have to, I can send you a report.
Okay. League of California Cities update. Just very briefly, I will be in Sacramento January 22nd through the 24th for the new mayors and council members academy, and also for policy committee meetings on 2 of those days. And we have some policy committee members here that hopefully will be there. February 4th through the 6th, I will be missing our council meeting. I'll be flying into Washington, D.C. with on behalf of the National League of Cities and the League of California Cities for meetings at the Capitol, hoping for good travel weather for that trip. The legislative session just opened yesterday. There's going to be robust activity with bills, some 2-year bills. The one that we know the most is SB 50. It was modified and reintroduced by Senator Scott Wiener. That's one that is being watched very carefully by league staff, and I just received notice that the governor's budget is being released later this week, and it's either the 9th or 10th, so I'll be able to report out on some of that, but we'll probably know all about it before our next meeting on the 21st, but any pertinent information I'd be happy to share. There is the one bill that we kind of smile at, but the Ting bill, AB 1356, that would, if passed, require a formula that allows cannabis retail permits based on how many alcohol licenses in a jurisdiction. There is language in that so that it would only potentially impact us to the point of having a single permit, but it would be required under that law as opposed to potentially optional. Many other topics that they're looking at: single-use plastics, redistricting related to the 2020 census, and I know that was something on the Board of Supervisors agenda today, discussing the March elections and the census. There are bills related to scooters that we don't see that at all here, but they're all over, especially major cities, and managing those has become a real problem. And also, as we can imagine, multiple proposals related to PG&E and wildfire related issues. So that's generally speaking the league update. Any other comments about that?
Well,
North Bay Division President?
yes, well, I was ill and we had to postpone the North Bay Division planning for the year. And we were trying to make sure that it happened in January. It looks like it'll be in February, that planning meeting. And I will be in Sacramento for the Revenue and Taxation Policy Committee meeting on the 23rd of January.
Very good.
And I will be there on the 24th, your Thursday, on Friday. And John will be there
You know
both
when you're
days.
gonna be there?
I will be there, I thought it was the 22nd, 23rd, but I will be there the second day of the policy committee meetings because I have been appointed to the community and housing policy. Not its exact name, but that's the gist of it.
Close enough. Housing and Community Development, something like that. Okay, next up, Cannabis Standing Committee. Our next meeting is this Friday, January 10th at 2 p.m. here in the council chambers. And that agenda has been posted. I saw that it was either earlier today or yesterday. A report on parking ad hoc committee? Anything to report? No?
We're still an ad hoc.
Good to know. Reports and announcements, very quickly. As was referenced earlier, the Countywide Climate Action Committee, Councilmember Dornbecker and I and Town Manager will be at the county building tomorrow. The meeting begins at 1:30 for that committee meeting. I wanted to recognize that we have the Elmville Crab Feed coming up on Saturday, January 25th. So if it's not already sold out, is it already sold out? 24 tickets remaining, so you better act fast. And the Elmville International Short Film Festival will be coming up February 6th through the 9th, and those tickets are also available to purchase. That's turned out to be a very fun and very reasonably priced event here in town. For those folks that like a larger crowd, Bottle Rock Music Festival announced its, not its day-to-day lineup, but its overall lineup. And tickets have gone on sale. I believe all the 3-day passes are already sold out. But that's set for the end of May. Any other reports or announcements? Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Director Holland, if you could, I think I saw somewhere that the Art Sip and Stroll has received a grant from the Arts Council. I thought you might just want to give a shout out on that.
We were just talking about that earlier. Yes, so we applied for a grant through Arts Council. It's county funding to support our up-and-coming artist participation in Art Sip and Stroll and create a pilot mentor program. So we're excited that through the Town of Yountville Community Foundation, we applied for that grant and received the funding. So we'll be pushing that out. The benefits of having a 501c3 for the town are coming through with grants. So thank you.
Well done. Any other reports or announcements? Again, we'd like to recognize Celia in her new role as our Director of Finance. Thank you very much. We'd love for you to report out every time that we have over $2 million to find a good home for, but sometimes it won't be quite so cheerful, I suspect. And also I want to recognize Sandra and the rest of our planning department staff for the work that has been going on. I know with the zoning and design ordinance reviews, we've made some great progress on that. So thank you, and Vice Mayor, and also Stephen Miller and Kimberly Cook have been part of that joint ZDRB Council subcommittee, because we're not going to be doing this for a year. I think that takes care of all of our business for this evening. Again, happy 2020 to everyone. And we have no closed session. I will entertain a motion for adjournment to our January 21, 6 p.m. meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you and good night.